I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to the August 2nd, 2012 council meeting. To start off, I would like to ask T.J. Smith to lead us in an invocation, and then Mr. Groby to lead us in a pledge.
Acknowledge all the life that you have given to us. We thank you, O God, for your Son, your Word, and your Holy Spirit. And we pray, O God, that this meeting will be pleasing and everything that we do will be pleasing in your eyesight, and that we give you all the praise, honor, and glory. And especially, dear God, this evening we would like to ask you to look in on the Lopez family tonight as they go through their hour of bereavement. We pray for them and that they were able to go through this time of loss. And that everything that we say and do, dear God, will be pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name we ask it all. Amen.
Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Ford, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dean? Mr. Sharp? Mr. Thompson? Mr. Faulkner? Mr. Tanner? Mr. Groby? Mr. Gould?
Here.
Mr. Canulet? Mr. Belisario? Ms. O'Brien? Mr. Stefanczyk? Mr. Bender? Mr. Artigue? Mr. Smith? You have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, under presentations, the first item is introduction of the junior council member for August, Christopher Kelly. Mr. Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have here, maybe you could stand up, huh? Young Christopher Kelly from my district, and Christopher is 9 years old, and he's from a wonderful family. He's going into 4th grade at Our Lady of Lourdes School. He has a normal favorite food, fish. And he wants to support his mom and dad by becoming an engineer later. Right, Christopher? I was going to say his favorite food was Brussels sprouts, but I mean, I knew he wasn't going to buy them. So he's a good young man, and maybe he'll be up here one day. Let's hear it for Christopher.
Okay, next item, presentation by Rusty Batty of annual update of the Louisiana Agricultural Center.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
How y'all doing this afternoon? Just to kind of give you another update real quickly. Yes, I work with the LSU Ag Center, oftentimes confused with the Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry. I like Dr. Mike Strain, but that's not my boss. I work with the LSU Ag Center, part of the LSU system. One of the things we do have the experiment and research stations and a parish office right here in St. Tammany. The Ag Center does have the research stations, like the one over in Hammond, the dairy station up in Franklinton, the Idlewild station over in Clinton. Those are experiment stations. They do the research there. Then we, in turn, disseminate that information to the parishes. I have a staff, or we have a staff with the Ag Center right here in St. Tammany Parish over at the fairgrounds. Encourage you to come by and visit sometime. Our mission, our job is to provide research-based information in natural resources, home and gardens, family health and nutrition. We're kind of like the Consumer Reports. If you know about Consumer Reports, they provide unbiased research information, and we do that, make recommendations to the St. Tammany residents. Tonight I'm here to kind of reintroduce some of our staff. We've got some new staff members that are working here in St. Tammany. I'd like to introduce those. We have with us Katie Terrio. Katie, if you would stand up in the back. Katie is our newest staff member. Started with the Ag Center in October of 2011. Katie does the 4-H youth development work along with Amy. I'll introduce her in a second. But Katie does primarily the livestock work. She has about 150 exhibitors this year with over 200 beef, sheep, goat, swine, and poultry projects that they're involved with. Some of you may have come to the parish and district show that we just had. Ms. Brister, thank you very much for serving as a judge this year. I don't know what you knew about cattle or anything, but you do know about people. Well, there you go. Every day we can learn a little bit of something, right? She was kind enough to help us out with our premier exhibitor judging. We had kids from all across the district, about 18 different parishes, and was able to help with that. Katie also works with another program with the 4-H youth with the outdoor shooting sports. She works with the archery, rifle, shotgun, all those other disciplines connected to that. Amy, if you would please stand. Amy is another 4-H agent we have. She works as a 4-H agent. Amy and Katie work about 30 different clubs in all the schools. Right now, about 850 members as of last year. Obviously, we're fixing to start up pretty quick again this year. Their primary goal is to help youth gain life skills through the 4-H model, learn by doing, and they've done a great job with that. Amy's worked this past year with Lifestyles Smart Bodies program. This year there was 3,500 youth involved in that, learning about regular exercise and eating healthier through body walks, which is a display that was brought out. Amy's also involved with the spearheads a youth wetland program that she and Katie and another agent that's here part-time, Minnie Brooks, have been involved with. They're going to be doing some plantings on the retainer ponds that are being put in across the parish. I know there's one right on Dog Pound Road, Harrison Avenue, and they'll be putting in around 6,000 trees this coming season, around January through March or so. So the 4-H kids are real involved. A lot of people hear about the 4-H program through the livestock program. That's most publicized, but there's a lot of other activities that they're involved with as well. So I appreciate Amy and Katie for that, Mindy as well to do that. We have other agents that also come into the parish from time to time. With us tonight is Karen Walker. Karen, if you'll please stand. Karen is a resident here, but she also works not only on the North Shore with foods and nutrition, she works on the South Shore as well. So she's over here a day or two a week, providing information for our elderly residents as well as some of the early age or early child kids that we have. Valerie, another agent that we have that works here a couple of days a week, works several parishes, works the Florida parishes, but she's in our office as well. The office, again, at the fairgrounds. Carol Franz, another agent, works with the St. Tammany Parish Water Quality Task Force. She works with Sea Grant and conducts wetland education. My job, I work as the county agent in the parish. Some of you that have been from the area for a long time may remember Mr. Bankston, Johnny Bankston. I don't, Mr. Tanner, you remember him? From a long time back, he was kind of one of my mentors, along with other agents that have come and gone. I work primarily with ag and natural resources, and one of my major focuses is with horticulture. And you may have heard and read about the Master Gardener program. That's one of the programs that I do among many. We're training parish residents to learn about horticulture, and then in turn, they'll go out and help their communities, their schools, churches, subdivisions to better maintain and better use some best management practices with the agriculture in their area. We have a class just starting up today, as a matter of fact, and have 30 more people from St. Tammany that will learn about that, and then in turn go out and through the libraries. Tonight, as a matter of fact, we have a master gardener teaching about the vegetable gardening to several different branches across the parish. This year alone, the master gardeners, that particular program I have, has worked about 3,000 volunteer hours in disseminating information, horticultural information. We have a plant show. Some of you may have attended that, the third weekend of March at the parish fairgrounds. So there's a lot of horticulture activities going on. A lot of people don't think necessarily of St. Tammany as an agricultural parish. We don't have the traditional agronomic crops here. We still have some cattle. We still have, obviously, some horses. We've got quite a bit of forestry that's in St. Tammany. But most of the work that goes on here in relation to agriculture is horticulture. Lots of homes being put in, lots of lawns and landscape questions that come up, and that's primarily the work that I'm working with. I invite you to come out to the fairgrounds anytime. Obviously, we're there every day, Monday through Friday, and would welcome your visits anytime along the way. So thank you for your support of the Ag Center. We've had a great year. We're looking forward to another school year coming up, a new year with the Master Gardeners, a new year with helping the residents of St. Tammany Parish with their agricultural needs. Thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, next item, a certificate of recognition to Ethan Hart for completing the FBI National Academy Youth Leadership Program. Mr. Groby, I believe you have a presentation for him. Come on up, Ethan.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Groby, for letting me be a part of this. I met Ethan earlier, and he's quite a young man. Whereas the FBI National Academy Associates host a week-long training event for high school students at the FBI Academy every summer called the Youth Leadership Program, and whereas this program is for qualified candidates ranging from 14 to 16 years of age entering high school as a sophomore or junior, and whereas each student must have demonstrated high academic standards and good citizenship, and they must be nominated by an FBINAA graduate and reviewed by the executive office and who make the final selection, and whereas 50 students nationwide and several from outside the country completed the 15th session of the FBI National Academy Associates Youth Leadership Program at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and whereas Ethan Hart, son of Captain William Hart, St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office, a soon-to-be sophomore at Lakeshore High School, was recently selected to attend the prestigious FBI National Academy Youth Leadership Program held in Quantico to be one of only 48 nationally chosen and the only one from Louisiana. And whereas Ethan Hart completed the 8-day program taught by FBI special agents, toured the FBI Academy, White House, U.S. Capitol, and participated in realistic training exercises, and whereas a final mental and physical challenge, Ethan accomplished the Yellow Brick Road, a 4-mile run across the Marine Corps obstacle course that features walls, ropes, and wooded trails, earned and completed the Yellow Brick. And whereas, in recognition of this incredible accomplishment, St. Tammany Parish government takes this opportunity to congratulate Ethan Hart on his great accomplishment. Congratulations.
I want to say one thing. Most of the time, the public doesn't understand this part of it. That side of the rail, it gets kind of boring and contentious. This is the fun side. Thank you very much for making it.
Okay, next item is a presentation by Lacey Taladano, Director of St. Tammany West Chamber of Commerce regarding the Mandeville capital improvements and chamber services. Need someone to place a motion up to remove? Second by Mr. Stefanczyk. Vote with your lights to remove this item. Thank you.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, I need someone to move up, well, first of all, we need to open up off-the-floor items, and we'll take that vote to open up. There are two resolutions that I'd like to have pulled, which would be number 1 and number 6. But we have a second by Mr. Canulet. Vote with your lights to open up the floor, and this has got to be unanimous.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, off-the-floor items, let's see. Number 1, presentation of a proclamation to recognize the 14th anniversary of Stark. This is by Mrs. Brister. Sure.
Again, whereas Stark is a private nonprofit organization that is dedicated to providing a lifetime of services, training, advocacy, resources, and community connections for individuals with developmental disabilities throughout the Florida parishes, and whereas since 1972, Stark has served thousands of St. Tammany Parish residents by providing a variety of services from therapeutic treatment to daycare to job training, and while it has grown through the years, the services still involve reaching out to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to connect them with the community and to encourage recognition of the unique and varied abilities that lie within everyone. And whereas, under the leadership of Diane Morgan Baham, Stark has helped individuals lead meaningful, productive, and fulfilling lives, from early intervention services for infants with developmental delays to elderly services for seniors. And whereas, the programs Stark provides include Early Steps, Noah's Ark Child Development Center, home and community-based waiver services, long-term personal care, personal assistance services, Solid Rock elderly service, residential community homes, adult day programs and services, commercial linen services, and a variety of enrichment programs. Now therefore, I, Patricia Brister, as Parish President of St. Tammany Parish, do hereby gratefully acknowledge the 40th anniversary of the Stark organization, and I thank the staff, volunteers, and benefactors for their outstanding service to the residents of St. Tammany Parish. Thank you, Diane.
Certainly, I am so thrilled. Stark did organize in 1972. We are celebrating our 40th year. I have been blessed to be a part of the work and ministry of Stark for 39 of those 40 years. When we first started, we served 3 children in a loaned building. Today, we are serving over 1,200 individuals and their families, and we have 14 different sites. We do provide a lifetime of services. We are so thrilled to be a part of this community and enjoy the support and the advocacy of our parish chamber. Each of you make a meaningful difference for our folks because of the investment that you make. We often use the little quote that says, "Tell me I forget, show me I remember, involve me and I understand." Your involvement makes a difference, whether you're donating Mardi Gras beads, whether you're donating picture frames, a car, whether you're donating old cell phones, whether you're volunteering in our program. Whatever you do helps to enrich and enhance the lives of the people that we serve, and we'll forever be grateful. We did develop for you a piece of artwork, and I'd like to present this to our parish president. This was developed in our art department, and it is a picture of the chamber council area, and we have a pack of cards for each one of you to just say, thank you so much. God bless you.
Miss Diane, Miss Diane, Miss Diane, if you could stay there. While our chairman is coming back to the podium to take over from me, hurry, Marty. As vice chairman, and I just have to say, you come here every year and you give us a report, and you always thank us. But I got to tell you, I mean, 39 years, and, you know, you're living proof, Miss Diane, that everyone is God's children. But you've lived living. I'm speechless. That doesn't happen to me. You've lived that life, and we appreciate it. And I tell you, we need to stand up for Miss Diane.
All right, I've got a request to also hear item number 5, which is a resolution authorizing the entering into the professional services contract by the Parish Council and the Municipal Code Corporation for a parish code revision and recodification project. This is sponsored by Mr. Groby and myself, and I believe, Mr. Bender, you wanted to discuss this.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman,
Wait a minute. All right, we need to open it. That's correct.
open it. I make a motion to open.
Second, vote with your lights to open item number 5.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the council, I know quite a few of us are aware of this, but there are certain times when I think that it's only fair to point out the good work of our colleagues. And I have to say, Mr. Groby was sworn in January, and we're very fortunate to have a terrific group of council members sworn in January with us, with the so-called old guard. But I want the people to know, and the council knows this, Mr. Groby led looking into the possibility of this happening tonight. And this is a wonderful, wonderful accomplishment in terms of cost to the parish on something that we absolutely need to do. It was his initiative that brought it to this. I also want to say that our chairman took a hold of it, and so did our parish president when we met on it. But Mr. Groby took the lead, and Mr. Groby, I personally want to thank you for really bringing something to the council. Thank you, sir. You make the motion, Mr. Groby.
So moved.
Second by Mr. Belisario. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right, item number 6, resolution opposing Governor Bobby Jindal's closure of Southeastern Louisiana Hospital in Mandeville, St. Tammany Parish. This is sponsored by myself, and really it should have been the whole council because everybody feels the same way. Ms. Brister, would you like to start off with this?
Yes, as you all know, it's been quite a blow when we got the news that Southeast Hospital would be closing. We learned it about 15 minutes before it hit the wires, so it came that suddenly. We have mid-meeting. We had about 40 people representing different areas of the parish meet the first time to talk about the issue and what it meant to us. We decided to follow through on our meetings, and we lowered the number, got a smaller working group, and we are now trying to put together a program some way to continue the outpatient services that are so important to this parish. We know that the beds are going to be gone. It's just a decision that has been made, and I don't know that there's any way we can get that back, the inpatient beds, but we must keep the outpatient services going, and we are working daily trying to do that. So you will be hearing more about it, and I appreciate the council's support on this. They have been involved in it from the beginning also, and we will come up with a solution some way or other. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of days ago, we met with the judicial people, the DA's office, the sheriff's office, and there was a lot of discussion about the impact on the judicial system and the jail system. We've had the honor of having Judge Will Crane here tonight. I'm going to ask him to come up and explain to us how important it is to maintain these types of services to the community. And this thing goes well beyond just the medical community.
Thank you, Chairman Gould, members of the council, for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I want to make it clear, I'm not here to give a policy talk. That is not the role of a judge. I understand what my role is. But I do think, since this has happened, and it doesn't only happen in this instance, there's others as well, that it is important for us to at least convey to you as the policymakers and to the citizens what the impact of the decisions will be. And this is one of them that we feel carries with it enough impact that it's important for us to convey that. Let me give you just a little bit of background. First of all, I'm privileged to serve on a district court that is probably one of the busiest in the state of Louisiana. I can tell you that for the last 3 years, 2 out of those 3 years, our court has been the second ranked as far as the number of felony jury trials tried in this state. We've got a very busy court, an active court. It's reflective of the growth that we've experienced across our parish. And we've got judges who work very hard. I can tell you personally that the days can be long, but I also wake up every morning excited to get back up and serve the citizens of this parish and district as a district judge. To give you just a brief overview of the impact of this decision, though, right now there are 5,000 people who are being supervised by our state probation and parole office, which is located here in Covington. 1,100 of those persons who are under supervision, probation supervision, have an underlying mental illness that has already been diagnosed. Those patients who are being and let me back up. When we sentence people in felony court, we basically have 2 options. We either send people to jail or we put people on probation. If we put someone on probation and they do not comply with the terms of their probation, then more often than not, that probation gets revoked and they go to jail. I will also say that it costs approximately, y'all may know better than I understand anywhere from $20,000+ a year to house a prisoner. So that's the impact of putting someone in jail for a year's time. Right now, with those 1,100 mentally parole probationers with underlying mental illness that are being supervised, 1,500, they generate 1,500 patient visits per year to Southeast Hospital. And that is typically on the Fontainebleau side where the treatment centers and stuff are. Now, to tell you how that impacts us, just that element of it, oftentimes the probation officers are taking them to the hospital for treatment as opposed to bringing them back in front of the judges for a probation violation that's going to result in a revocation and an incarceration. So a large number of those, thank you, a large number of those 1,500 patient visits are actually avoiding incarceration and the cost associated with incarceration. Another place where it has a very significant impact, right now, of those 5,000 probation persons, approximately 450 of them are on probation for either 3rd or 4th offense DWI. With a 3rd or 4th offense DWI, again, 2 options. Number 1, a jail sentence. Number 2, they can be put on probation, but if put on probation, one of the requirements is that they either participate in our DWI or drug court or a 28-day inpatient hospitalization for drug treatment followed by a year of outpatient treatment. We use Southeast Hospital for those 28-day inpatients. Many districts across the state don't have that resource available to them. If it's not available, then the only option for those persons is that they be sent to jail. Now, out of that 450, I think right now in our DWI court, we've got right at 100 people. So that means that you've got, we got 350 people who have been convicted of 2nd or 3rd or 4th offense DWI who have to have the 28-day inpatient. So if the hospital is not available to them, they're going to jail for at least a year and up to 5 years for third offense, up to 20 years on a fourth offense. So you can see in very clear numbers at $20,000 per person for one person to be in jail for a year, what putting those in jail as opposed to going through the inpatient and the treatment does. The other thing I would point out, and it goes to treatment, I was indoctrinated under the traditional view of the court, where if you commit a crime, then you do the time. We have found, though, that we simply cannot incarcerate everybody that comes in front of us. That we don't have the resources to do it, the facilities to do that. So we have been up front in this court, in our district. We have been one of the leaders in this state in coming up with alternative means to incarceration. DWI court and drug court are two of those alternative means. To tell you how impactful they are, in the general population, person who is convicted of a drug offense, who is sentenced to jail, and then does his time and gets released, 50% of those repeat offend. They're coming back in front of me. They're now a multiple offender. They're looking at longer jail sentences. Statistically, those that get sent to DWI or drug court, which involves the treatment, oftentimes the 28-day inpatient treatment, therapies and so forth, monitoring on a weekly basis, the repeat rate for those is 5%. So we've gone from 50% to 5% with that. When you eliminate those opportunities for treatment, we have no alternative but to incarcerate. So again, I'm giving you that information because those are supportable data. The numbers are there. They speak for themselves. Again, I'm not here making a policy talk, but as policy makers, I do think it is important that everybody understand what the impacts of those decisions are. With that said, I will be glad to field any questions that you may have if I can. But again, I also thank you on behalf of our court for giving me the opportunity to come and address y'all here this evening.
Judge, one thing that came up during the discussion, even the individuals that weren't like a DWI or a drug charge, there were people who had underlying mental illnesses that if they stopped having their treatment, they were going to end up before you guys again.
There's no question.
And the thing is that if we don't pay for it through the mental health hospital, we're going to pay for it through the judicial system. And what's best for the people, what's best for those patients, is an important thing that we need to address. Gene, I believe you wanted to speak, and then I'll go to Jerry.
Okay, just a couple of things. Tuesday evening, I had my community meeting, and I had invited John Tobin to come to talk about the crisis response team and the suicide prevention program that the parish government and United Way are handling. And John spoke for probably 25 minutes. And in that discussion, the thing that I picked up quickly, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. There was people who were a cross-section of my district who were listening to John, as someone told me they didn't want to listen to him because they didn't want to know what the truth was. But they heard it from him, and he was concise on points, giving them statistics. And then Mr. Crane had shown up, so he spoke from the judicial side, just like he did here, and these people were overwhelmed at the seriousness of the closure of this hospital and were quite upset about it. So I just want to pass that on.
Jerry?
Thank you. And Judge, I just wanted to thank you first for coming here tonight to stand before us and the good people of our parish. But I have to tell you, I've been very, very concerned about this after hearing the information you provided. And as I'm sitting here, I'm saying to myself, what Judge Crane is telling us is this is what life is like every day in his courtroom. And that's just on the offender side. Then we also have the side of just good people who have mental illness, you know? It's just incredible to me, Mr. Chairman, that the closure of this hospital would take place. And not only from your direction, but from the direction of the people who have that need, you know? And so I appreciate you coming.
Mr. Bennett, if I could address real quickly what Chairman Gould had mentioned, that goes to the 1,100 people who they have under supervision who have underlying mental illnesses. Now, to tell you, again, an area that we've been progressive on, we have just begun a mental health court because we realized that so many of our drug offenders have an underlying mental illness that if it does not get addressed, we're spinning our wheels dealing with trying to get them off of the drug and beat the addiction if we don't address the underlying mental illness. So we've been progressive in that area through you all's support, as well as the support of the district attorney and the sheriff's office in putting together a mental health court that will assist in addressing those issues. Once again, it's going to make that challenge doubly hard by not having those resources available to us.
Mr. Dean?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to say, I'm on the Florida Parish's Human Services Authority Board, myself and John Tobin. There's one other person from St. Tammany, and it's over the 5 Florida parishes. So we are charged with, kind of basically running the 2 addiction places out there, and just other across 5 parishes. One of the things, I'm kind of mixed here, because I do understand that over the years, there's no way that this state can maintain what it's been attempting to maintain, obviously for political reasons, or hospitals built every couple of miles and universities and everything else. So we do have to, I understand where the governor is going with that, but at the same time, to be able to and Ms. Brister making the statement that it is, the beds are gone, there's nothing we can do about it. I do appreciate what she's doing and others with her. But I guess kind of the way that it was done, because it's like, okay, now it's gone. There are many, many people. There's 70 people out there who are being treated for alcohol and drug addiction out on Southeast grounds. 70 people. Come December, there won't be any, unless I believe that we're going to try to do, correct, John, some RFPs to see if we could get somebody privately. We could hang on to the alcohol and drug programs. Inpatient could be out there, I understand, through June, but we would have to provide our own food and our own laundry and everything else that is being taken care of at Southeast. So, number one, if anybody knows of any corporation or a group of individuals or whatever who want to do an RFP for alcohol and drug program, please let us know. But then secondly, but mainly I guess what I'm saying is it really upsets me how it was done, because you're talking about the mentally ill folks, about 270 folks out there to begin with, but then there are several other programs who are leasing space from the state out there that will not have any place to go from there. So it's a difficult situation. It says a lot about, I think, our parish, that our leadership is just not taking it lying down, and we're trying to kind of find some answers.
Mrs. Brister?
Hey, I will just close with this. Thank you, Judge Crane. I think you brought it to us very forcefully, what it means in that area. And I agree with you, Mr. Dean. Having it forced on you is one thing. Having it forced on you immediately is just tragic. If we were given another year to look for places for these programs, it would certainly help. But Senator Donahue, who was at the meeting, asked Secretary Greenstein specifically, will you delay this? And he said, no, it's done. There's no delay, no extension or anything else. So that has made it doubly difficult. So I think we have determined that we're trying to take over a service that we feel belongs in the state realm, and we're trying to do the best we can, but we will continue to find a way. We do have, obviously, a public health millage in this parish that everyone has paid, and it does help pay for these programs, but there's no way we can do any more than we do and go further on these programs than we do right now with that millage. So Thank you very much, Mr. Gould, for bringing this up.
Thank you. You know, I have to share an email with everyone that I got from a lady in my district, and this really hit home. She had a 16-year-old son, still has a 16-year-old son, who last year threatened to kill himself twice. The lady could not get an appointment with a psychiatrist any sooner than 6 weeks. This child was in crisis. She finally got assistance from one of the doctors at Southeastern Hospital, and they met with the child, they worked through the issues, and they saved that child's life. That's gone. The state's pulling the rug out from under us. That's gone. Hits home with me, especially because I have a 16-year-old son. And for the state to just do this to us in this manner is just not called for. Judge, I really appreciate the fact that you've taken time out from your campaign to be here with us. I think you brought good information to explain to the public, and thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Gould.
I need a motion to approve this resolution by Mr. Belisario, second by Mr. Bender. Vote with your lights on the resolution, please.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. Any items not pulled from the consent calendar are automatically approved in whole by one vote. Items pulled from the consent calendar are discussed and voted upon individually. The following items I have written down is under ordinances for introduction, number 12, number 13, and number 14. Under resolutions, I have item number 1, 2, 4, and 11. Council members, do we have any other items that you would like to pull and discuss from the audience? Okay, I'll entertain a vote to approve the consent calendar by Mr. Bender, second by Mr. Belisario. Vote with your lights on the consent calendar.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right. Number 12. Okay, first item is ordinance calendar number 4853, ordinance to amend the Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 13, to add new sections providing for operation of motorized vehicles and enforcement of traffic controls on private streets within Lakeshore Estates subdivision. Mr. Ortiz, I believe you have an amendment that you would like to put in?
Yeah, there's an amendment that has to be done to it.
And that,
Yes, sir, Mr. Artigue. Lakeshore Estates roads are currently owned by the developer, Tammany Holding Company, so the ordinance just needs to reflect that.
so the motion on the amendment?
So moved.
Second by Mr. Belisario again. Vote with your lights. Oh, excuse me, that's just needed a motion to introduce.
You need to vote.
Oh, the amendment, that's right. I'm getting ahead of
You're
myself.
doing good. Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Mr. Artigue moved to introduce.
So moved.
Second by Mr. Belisario. All right, move on to item number 13. Ordinance calendar number 4854, emergency ordinance to impose a 30-day moratorium on the issuance of administrative permits for agricultural uses within the boundaries of St. Tammany Parish Council District 9 in all areas located south of Interstate 10 and east of Military Road. Mr. Belisario?
Yes, I've come upon an instance in my subdivision, which is my district, where I've seen under the residential zones, A1 through A8, that people come in and can apply for an administrative permit, and they're with various uses without any permitted use existing on that piece of property. And this just confounds me because of my years on zoning from many years ago, and as also as a council person. I never knew someone can have a piece of property that was not developed, could come in and apply for an administrative permit for that particular residential category and just go through the process and get it. What I want to do is to put a moratorium in so that we can work with the administration through the zoning commission to change the ordinance by the discrete areas, because I know it's not a simple change because of the sizes of the lots and pieces of property you'll have from A1 up through A8. So there has to be a companion workmanship between the administration and the zoning commission to properly lay that out by the different lot sizes on looking especially at agricultural uses. So I'm making a move to move forward with the moratorium.
Would you, you want to make a move to suspend the rules and adopt as well?
That is correct.
All right, we got to do the introductions first. So we have it introduced. Now move to suspend the rules and adopt. Second. Okay. Vote with your lights on the emergency moratorium.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right. Item number 14 is ordinance calendar number 4855, ordinance to impose a 6-month moratorium on the issuance of administrative permits for agricultural uses within the boundaries of St. Tammany Parish Council District 9 in all areas located south of Interstate 10 and east of Military Road. And there will be a special meeting on 8/29 of this month to hear this ordinance, since the 30-day moratorium runs out prior to our next council meeting. So I need a motion to introduce.
So moved.
Second by Mr. Groby. Okay, and that's all we need to do with that. All right, under resolutions, first one pulled is item number 1, resolution, council series number C-3411, resolution appointing government consultants incorporated as independent financial advisor to St. Tammany Parish. And we recommended that this be postponed until a September meeting. I need someone to move on that.
So moved.
Mr. Bender, second by Mr. Stefanczyk. Vote with your light, vote with your lights on the postponement.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right, next one is resolution, council series number C-3414, resolution to concur, not concur, with the town of Pearl River annexation and rezoning of 2.08 acres. This is Ward 8, District 6.
So moved.
Second by, move to concur or not concur?
Concur.
To concur, okay, and second by Mr. Thompson. Vote with your lights on the concurrence.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, item number 4, resolution, council series number C-3472, resolution approving the issuance of not exceeding $600,000 of limited tax certificates, series 2012, the State Fire Protection District number 4, State of Louisiana. I need a motion to postpone. And second by Mr. Belisario. Vote on the postponement, please.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right, last item to pull. Number 11, resolution, council series number C-3479, resolution to concur, not concur with the city of Covington and annexation and rezoning of 1.83 acres. This is in Ward 3, District 5. I met with the mayor. I'm very satisfied with what they're doing. I'd ask someone to move on it. By Mr. Belisario, second by Mr. Canulet. Please vote with your lights on the concurrence.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right, moving on to appeals. First appeal, applicant Attorney Jeff Shane for Teller Creek Shooting Grounds, LLC, appealing the zoning commission denial on July 3rd, 2012, to rezone 183.39 acres located east of Louisiana Highway 1077, north of Louisiana Highway 1085, south of U.S. Highway 190 from A2 to A3. And let me read the second part of this appeal, because there are 2 appeals. The second one, we'll hear both of them, but vote separately. The second one is applicant Jeff Shane for Tallow Creek Shooting Grounds, LLC, appealing the zoning commission denial on July 3rd, 2012, to rezone 116.30 acres located east of Highway 1077, north of Highway 1085, south of Highway 190, from A2 to a PUD, Plan Unit Development, Ward 1, District 3. Mr. Shane.
Thank you, Chairman Gould, and good evening, Council. For the record, my name is Jeff Shane, and I'm an attorney with the Jones Fussell Law Firm here in Covington, and I have the pleasure of representing Mr. Mike Dorrington, who is here with me this evening on the front row, and the owner of the Tallow Creek Shooting Grounds, LLC, which is the owner and petitioner in the case before you. I appreciate Mr. Fontenot handing out to you some diagrams and PUD plan that I would like to review with you as we go through the case this evening. I'd like to take just a minute and give you a brief history of what this case is all about. It is an attempt by Mr. Dorrington to seek some A3 zoning pursuant to a plan unit development or PUD plan that would allow for a residential development on approximately 116 acres that he owns on the east side of Highway 1077. That's in District 1, as you know, on the western side of our parish. The first handout that I gave you is where this project started almost a year ago. And I think it's important that you understand that in our initial planning, our concepts that we discussed amongst the development team and also discussed and presented to the community, meaning the people that live in that area, included a multi-use development that would have been more in line with a mini traditional neighborhood design. And it had various components, as you can see, approximately 11.5 acres of highway commercial HC2 in the front, some out parcels. Also, you can see 160 multifamily units, over 12.5 acres, and 42 single-family units on approximately 15 acres. That plan has dramatically evolved into something which we feel is not only much more conservative, but also much more compatible with not only the zoning in that area, but the actual land use. And this evolution has occurred as a result of numerous meetings, not only with the Zoning Commission, not only through community meetings that the Zoning Commission fostered, but also meetings with the leadership of people in that area, resulting in the PUD plan, which is the document entitled Creekstone Oaks PUD that you see before you. If you would, please have that in front of you as I go through what I think are some very important points. When the project first started, and in fact you'll see in the caption of the appeal, the entire 186 acres was sought to be rezoned to A3. Tonight we only ask that 83.3 acres be zoned A3. So from 186.6 to 83.3. When the project started, it consisted of a residential layout that could have accommodated 275 single-family units. The plan before you this evening includes 150 single-family units, from 275 to 150. When we started this project, many of the lots were located in some wetlands areas that would have required permitting by the U.S. Corps. The plan that you see before you this evening has no lots within any wetlands area on this tract. The plan before you this evening identifies the existing shooting grounds. This property, in part, has traditionally and is currently used as a shooting range for the general public that wishes to come out and pay a fee to have the opportunity to shoot their firearms. That particular 70 acres is now excluded from the proposed development, and there is no zoning change requested for that parcel. Also note that in the red or orange colored areas along Highway 1077, this project now has a 100-foot buffer along the highway and a 200-foot strip that will remain zoned A2. In addition, the areas where the lots are located in the front of the development, you'll see Phase 1 and Phase 2, those areas, in fact, will be zoned A2. And the reason is that most of that area is primarily zoned A2, with one significant exception. Bordering this property to the south, and you'll see it on the PUD plan, is the Tuscany subdivision, which is an existing PUD, single-family residential, which is approved with all infrastructure in place and homes currently under construction, allowing 1.9 units per acre, almost 2 lots an acre, A3 zoning. This plan before you this evening with only 150 lots on 116 acres.
5 minutes, okay, you're into your rebuttal time.
And how much rebuttal time do I have, sir?
The question is, do we have 2 5-minute segments, or I only gave him 5? But
We can go another 5, and then, but the opposition will have
You're
the same
hearing
equal
2
amount of
items,
times.
though.
What's that?
You're hearing 2 items,
Okay, that's fine.
whichever way that,
Go ahead, Mr. Shane,
And
you
I'll
have
try to
5
be-
more minutes on
I'll
regular.
try to be brief, sometimes famous last words, but I think it's important also to see that the density for this development, which neighbors the PUD development to the south of it, is only 1.28 units per acre. I believe that all of you know, but for those in the general public that don't deal with these density figures every day, the density in A2 is 1 unit per acre, and the density in A3 is 2 units per acre. At 1.28 units per acre, it's very clear that this is not only a much more modest density than the PUD immediately adjoining it, but it is also a density that is much closer to A2 than it is to A3. All of these changes were done to accommodate the many comments that we heard from the general public and from zoning commissioners as we went through this process. Furthermore, we commit this evening that if this property is in fact zoned as requested, and if in fact we are able to procure both tentative and preliminary subdivision approval, once the subdivision is complete and we receive final approval, we will absolutely close the shooting range. There will no longer be a shooting range operation on the 70 acres. We will conduct the necessary environmental study or audit to determine the condition of that property after the lead has been harvested off of the surface. And thereafter, depending on what that report suggests, the owner would then, of course, take the necessary action to make sure that the 70 acres is in fact in suitable condition and one that would not pose any concern or present any impacts. Let me emphasize that the request before you this evening does not include the 70-acre shooting range. There's been no shooting on the 116 acres, but nevertheless, the owner has committed that before development of the 116 acres occurs, we likewise will do an appropriate environmental study and audit to make sure that there are no impacts or dangers that might affect anyone that would, of course, live in our subdivision. That's not only a common sense requirement and one that would meet the law, but it's one that you know that a lender is going to demand, a developer is going to demand, a general contractor is going to demand, and certainly we know that people that are consumers, that are prospects to buy these homes, they're going to want to know that question. We have no actual knowledge that there are any issues or impacts currently presented by this site, but common sense tells us that when we close this operation, appropriate studies need to be done to ensure that the public safety is first and foremost. Let me close by saying that I think that this project is one that meets the test of suggesting that it's compatible to other development in the area. As I've referenced before, the Tuscany West PUD immediately to the south. I think it also is consistent with the zoning in the general area because much of this tract will now retain its A2 zoning. More than 50% of this tract is going to remain A2. And I believe that this is the type of development that we should encourage because this is going to be a residential area in the future. I think the recreational commercial use of the shooting range is not the highest and best use of the property. This type of development will demand the introduction of central sewage and water, not only for this project, but bring it again into the area with possibility of expansion to others. which is again an environmental positive situation as we have growth in our parish. So we feel we've given you lots of good reasons to consider overriding the vote of the Zoning Commission. And let me finish by explaining to you that at the Zoning Commission meeting, a rather interesting result occurred. On the night of July 3, the commission, which now only sits with 10 members, only had 6 members present. 6 members being the minimum amount in order to get a quorum. And that night, to get a matter passed, you had to have unanimity in order to have an action prevail. This project received 4 votes in favor, 2 votes against. It comes to you as a denial, so for that reason, we request that you override the lack of recommendation from the Zoning Commission, and that number 1, you approve the A3 request for 83.3 acres, and that number 2, you approve the PUD request over the entire 116 acres, so that Mr. Dorrington will have an opportunity to complete his business plan. I appreciate your time, and any time I might have, still have, I'd like to retain for rebuttal. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
I didn't ask if there was opposition. I knew there was. Dr. Martin, I know you wanted to speak on this. You could come to the mic and get started. The question is are there any other residents that wish to speak on this issue, just so I don't pass anybody up? Okay. One other gentleman? All right, you have 10 minutes, so
Okay, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Let me start off with this. I met with Jeff Shane, and it was interesting, and we did start talking about, well, you can't have strip malls on 1077. We really don't want that. And then we went to the civic meeting, and we sat down and started talking with the people that live in the area. And it was a great deal of learning that went through. And I think we have to really stop and look at what this particular piece of land has been used for by nature for the last 100, 200, whatever number of years. And I think we've got to look outside the box at, let's just develop. Being in the medical field, development for development's sake is called cancer. So we got to look outside the box. This particular piece of land collects the water that comes down from 190, and there's a big pool there. And if anybody's going down 190 after a rain, you'll see that the houses along there that you can see are flooded. And if you look at your plat plan there, you'll see that there's a lot of wetlands that are involved. Well, what nature does is collect water at that place and then feed it off through the soap and tallow. There are 2 things that I gave y'all. I think we need to look at this land as not development land. When we did the overlay plan, your zoning people, your staff, we met, they said this land should be A2. When this went before the zoning staff said this land should be A2. A3 is not appropriate for this. There is no A3 that was there as we went through the overlay plan. Tuscany West was there before, and that's for sure. And Mr. Fulmer lives in Tuscany West, and he'll tell you about the flooding that we had after the last rains in Tuscany West. But this land collects the water and then drains it off. When we start putting houses there, when we start putting development there, we're going to change that. And that's going to create a problem all the way downstream, all the way south. If you look, I gave two things to y'all. One was just a cover sheet. This is the EPA. They're 50, 60 pages on best management practice for shooting range outdoors. The gist of that was the worst place to have a shooting range is on wetlands or over ponds. That's what this is. Okay, now that's the one thing that y'all have. So this is not a good place to have had a shooting range, but it's been there, and it's been a very functional. I've shot there before, and it was a nice place to shoot. The second thing you have is a soil survey, St. Tammany Parish, and this is a survey of the shooting range. If you look on page 31 of that, there's a colored diagram. The United States government lists 3 different soils. It lists one soil, which is no limitation. It lists another soil, which is sort of a yellowish gray color, which is somewhat limited. And then it lists a third soil, which is a very limited soil use. Okay? That's what this is. If you look, it's a big red square. This soil, this land, has a very limited use on it. Now, I've been through that. I went to Pontchartrain, after I finished my tour in the Air Force, I bought a house in Pontchartrain Shores. Lived there about 10 years, moved, somebody bought it. After they bought the house from me, now Pontchartrain Shores had been there 15 some odd years. After I left that house, 5 years later, the slab cracked in half, they had to tear the house down. I moved to Kenner. I put up a house with commercial pilings, okay, because the land was a little wetland area. 3-4 years down the line, you couldn't open the windows on the south side of my house, okay? Settling. People building on that property, you can muck it out, you can do whatever you want. The U.S. government says that is a very limited use piece of property. It's water. It's not a place to put more people. It's A2. Putting more people is not responsible to get more people into that land. We need to think outside the box. That land probably should be used as mitigation land. That's what it's doing now. It's wet. Yeah, 5. Okay. That land should probably be used as mitigation land, not development land. We don't have an area of mitigation in that basin. I'm sure Ms. Bristol would love to have a mitigation land. Use it as a mitigation land. There are other less sensitive areas that could buy into that, and not only would the people in the area benefit from it, but the parish would benefit from it. They say, well, that's too small. They have mitigation lands that are 70 acres, okay? Mr. Shane's been trying to get mitigation land along the coast, I think the Gust Island places. That's a big piece of land. If you put a house on there, a unit, Franklin Kyle said it's going to cost $20,000, $25,000 per unit to put for the infrastructure. The U.S. government will give $40-something thousand for mitigation land. We really need to not give this A3. We need to leave it A2. And I think we need to look at this as something that's going to benefit the parish. We need to get a grant to clean up the lead, all right? You can't have a shooting range and have houses there. You can't have the lead. The lead needs to go first before anybody gets there. How can you keep a kid from going in collecting frogs in that marshland, okay, where lead is oxidized, and you can't scoop that up? It's oxidized. It's an acid land. And a kid catches frogs, goes home and eats a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and now he's got lead. It's there. Lead going into, there's nothing wrong with the shooting range, nothing wrong with lead and shells, nothing wrong with shooting. Lead in the ground that's not picked up, lead in the wetlands is toxic. So we've been putting toxic material on this land for whatever, 20 years, 30 years, whatever time the shooting range is there. So we got a toxic dump. I assume that's what you call it. You got lead in it, okay? We need to get that cleaned up, but we certainly don't want to put more people there. We're having trouble with lead going down to Soap and Tallow because they tested and there's more lead down there. We need help to get that land cleaned up. I know Mr. Dean probably went crazy trying to do something with that land. We've got an opportunity, okay? Get a grant, come in, have somebody license, clean up that land, use it as a wetland mitigation, much better than going A3, okay? I know I would not want my grandkids on that land, and I would think y'all wouldn't either, because there are problems, and it's going to take a lot of cleaning up, and I think they need help to do it, and I think we need to look some other place besides putting more houses on that land. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sir, I believe you wanted to speak on this issue. So please state your name for the record.
Robert Fulmer, and I live at 834 Capistrano Court in Tuscany West subdivision off of 1077. Our subdivision has roughly about 100.
You got 2 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Reason why I'm here is I'm against this development because we're already experiencing flooding in our subdivision, and twice the house in the back almost got water in because the lake gets full very fast and the water has no place to go. So I just wanted to bring that to y'all attention, because if they develop the land next door, then where is all that water going to go? Into our subdivision? So that's all I have to state.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Dr. Martin, you...
Probably have 30 seconds. I hope 30 seconds. Would the people that are against this becoming an A3 please stand up? These are the people that live in the area. I just wanted to show you that there's a lot of representation of those people that were there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you got any time left?
My name is Earl Wilson. I'm a resident of Goodby, Louisiana, and thank you for letting me have a few seconds to kind of share with you some concerns that I might have. One of the big issues that I have is, of course, the lead. We've talked about the lead, to a great length, but I think you need to be aware of the major reason lead is bad, especially for youngsters, 6 years and younger, is the fact that it transports real easy. Off your feet, like for an example in New Orleans with all the lead paint, just the air moving blows lead into the ground, and that's where kids play. That's where people walk. So the transport of the lead is real important in this development. So if you don't take and walk on that soil where all the lead is, and a bullet composition is primarily at least 50% lead, if not more. Now, there's some new bullets coming out, and I think that the people from the firing range are aware of it. It's called green bullets, and if they started using green bullets, they wouldn't have much of a problem with lead. But the years have been shooting, the lead in that ground has to be tremendous. Now, I know they have recently started using a maintenance whereby they're taking that lead out of that ground. But until they do a good soil and a good composition study on how much lead is in that land, I think it's foolish to go ahead and proceed from where you are. It doesn't make sense.
You're in your rebuttal time, just to let you know.
Well, just real quickly, I think it's real important that we take and we test that soil and test it properly. It's got to be done in layers. And if you look at the EPA guidelines, that will give you instructions to do it properly. And I hope they follow through with that. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Earl. Mr. Shane?
How much time do I have, please?
You only have 4 minutes. You were within a second of going out of time.
Good.
So.
Thank you, sir. With regard to Dr. Martin's comments, I do not care to refer to the C word that he used, because I think it's inappropriate, and also I really don't appreciate, as I've told him before, his suggestion that this is a toxic dump. He doesn't have evidence of that, and I think it's unfair to talk about anyone's land unless you have facts to back that up. I respect the fact that people can disagree as to whether or not land use should be made. I guess my buzzword, though, for tonight will be is that I look at this property and project as an opportunity for a cure. And I would suggest to you that many of the things that I talked about in my presentation presents an opportunity to do some really good things. It's a very modest density residential development. It stays out of the wetlands. It's environmentally sensitive and will have central sewer and water. It has large green spaces. And I think I made it clear that before the residential portion, the 116 acres is developed, there will be environmental testing to make sure that there are no lead values or lead issues that create impacts. I think I also made it clear that the development of this property will ultimately give Mr. Dorrington an opportunity to not only close the range, to extract the lead from the surface, and to determine what, if anything, may need to be done to that 70-acre property. That's an opportunity that he cannot achieve for himself, but also for the community, unless he has an opportunity to make use of his land. And I think that's another important point. Again, I respectfully disagree with the suggestion that he should magnanimously make this a mitigation bank. Dr. Martin's right. I do know a little bit about mitigation banks because of the nature of my business. I checked with a wetlands consultant this week, one of the more renowned in this region, to confirm what I thought I already knew. Not only is the size and the configuration of this land very limiting, but almost always these mitigation banks have to be periodically burned off. You would not be able to do burning of this land in this area, particularly with the good people of Tuscany West and all the other residents, many of which have lived out there for generations. That is not what Mr. Dorrington wants to do, but quite frankly, that's not the solution. The solution is to give him an opportunity, as others have had the opportunity, to develop his land in a compatible, modest manner that has amenities, engineering features, etc., that tell us that the impact should not be oppressive on the neighbors. I know you know this, but please remember, this is a zoning issue. This is not an issue tonight about hydrology, about soil type, about compaction. You know well that you have subdivision regulations and a planning commission that would have to review this project thoroughly after detailed traffic, hydrology, and other necessary tests have been performed and presented to the people that have expertise within your departments. My point is, there's a time and a place. It's not my way of negating the validity of the issue, but it's not a valid issue in my view during the zoning examination tonight. Last but not least, if we also think a significant problem is flooding in the area, I would suggest to you that your drainage ordinance, which I commend you for, is probably as arduous and as strict as any residential drainage ordinances that we have in Louisiana and perhaps in the southeast part of the country. I'll finish in 30 seconds if you'd also give
Absolutely.
the opposition
Absolutely.
the same 30 seconds. And my point is simply this: the rate of runoff from this property will be reduced by 25%. So if the gentleman that lives in Tuscany believes that some of his flooding problems are because of the undeveloped land to the north of him, I would suggest to you the solution to his problem is to let this property be developed and let a state-of-the-art drainage system be put in. It will reduce the problem, not exacerbate it. I appreciate the additional time. Again, I ask you to override the zoning commission and zone 83 of these acres A3 and grant us our PUD this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Martin? And Mr. Fulmer, if you want to speak, just let me know. Okay.
I have
Okay.
4 minutes.
I do apologize to Jeff. I thought lead was toxic. It is toxic. And I thought we were dumping it on a land. So I apologize. I put the two words together. And I certainly don't want to downgrade or whatever. But anyway, you're putting, you can't improve, you can't dig out soap and tallow, okay? The soap and tallow is a tributary of our scenic river, which is the Defuncta. So you're not going to improve the drainage through the soap and tallow. And the soap and tallow sits on a corner of that property. That's where a lot of the water goes, right into the soap and tallow. So what we need to do is not try to buck Mother Nature. Mother Nature has done this for hundreds of years. That's where the water goes. And if you're going to try to beat, I think the Corps of Engineers tried to beat Mother Nature and didn't do a real good job. But if we're going to try to beat what Mother Nature's done for a couple of hundred years, we're going to increase flooding in other places. And we know that that's a problem. So we shouldn't, we should use that for what it's used for. I do feel like there's all kinds of problems trying to get something as mitigation land. but it's doable. I think it's doable. And I think cleaning up the lead is doable with the government help. And I think your staff has said this should be A2. I think the boards has said this is A2. And I see no reason why this particular piece of property, above all the others we've worked with over the years, we should put more people there when there's no other A2 around that they've done in the overlay plan. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mr. Fulmer?
I guess I should have clarified earlier. In my subdivision, we only have 6 families living there presently. And what I'm not blaming like the neighbors or anything for the water buildup. It's just that the more houses that the developer builds in our subdivision, we're going to flood even more, because right now, that retention lake in the back, it fills up so quick that the water just stands there. And my concern is that if these people build another development, they're going to probably be experiencing what we have, because it doesn't take much of a rainfall for those ditches to fill up, and then when it does, the lake just overflows, and then the water just comes from the pool area in that house up to the front of the subdivision. So my biggest concern is that these developers think they have all the answers, but Mother Nature, I think, knows better. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion in the public? Okay, I'm going to close the floor and open up to individuals who want to speak. I'll start with Mr. Dean first, I guess.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Gould. I'm not real sure who I'm asking this question to, but what body would be, who would, for example, before they began building, if they were going to begin building there, what body is it that they'd have to go before and get a certificate? Maybe, Jeff, I'm asking you, get some type of certificate to declare that that is a safe land to build on, build houses?
Well, I think that assuming the zoning was in place, in order to develop the land, we would have to go through the Planning Commission process. And it's very likely that the Planning Commission and your staff would want to know if any of the area being developed has a history of being part of the shooting grounds, which it does not. But that does not mean that there could not be inquiry. And again, we have stated that before we begin any development of the 116 acres, that we would produce an environmental study to negate or tell us what conditions may be there and what we have to deal with.
Would DEQ automatically be involved?
You know,
because it's a...
No, sir. I mean, I think one of the things that's happened is that it's obvious that bullets have lead and that there's been a lot of shooting there for a long time. But that is not necessarily suggestive that there are issues there that require some type of regulatory act. I mean, the shooting range has roughly a 30-year history, 25, 30-year history. It's well known to the public. My guess is that if there was a problem, there would be a local or a state agency or maybe a federal agency that would have already knocked on Mr. Dorrington's door. Now, I don't say that with arrogance because I don't know. I can say that no one's knocked on his door, but my point is I think it's somewhat unfair to us work under the assumption that any of the land, but particularly the 116 acres, I'm distinguishing that from the 70 acres where the shooting ground is, there's no reason to believe that we have any problem. But I think to answer your question, we will do that of self-initiative, but I am very confident that that is going to be a continual question through the planning process.
Okay, thanks. As a representative who was there for, I had the area for 8 years, Dr. Martin is correct. It always came up anytime anybody proposed anything out there. When Tuscany was just being proposed, it was discussed. Everybody was worried that kids were going to be shot and everything else. I mean, it's always kind of out there. It's always a discussion. Also during the discussion, during the comprehensive rezoning, we discussed certainly no commercial in between the two intersections. From the 1085 intersection and the 190 intersection was where we wanted to keep it. So then you're kind of looking at, well, what do you do with that piece of land? I always said, and I said it publicly, and I'll say it again, I always thought that if we could get an opportunity to stop the shooting and to clean up the land, and if we needed to, and I really hesitate using this word, but if we needed to kind of bend the rules a little bit, if we needed commercial, some type of light commercial, whatever, I think that we ought to look at it. I've made that statement many, many times. So that's kind of where I am. We're only looking at as a previous district councilman, we're looking at going from A3, I'm sorry, from A2 to A3 and a very low density. Anyway, that's just kind of, that's where I've always stood with it. So I personally don't have a problem with it.
Mr. Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just first, a few comments. I was thinking of it right as Mr. Shane mentioned it, and that is, it is a zoning issue before us, okay? However, I do have to say, because of Dr. Martin and his presentation, I don't see anything wrong with addressing what we have here, okay? So, Dr. Martin, I appreciate your comments on that. But let's get to the zoning. For me, 1.28 units per acre is a real nice give and take from where I heard this started at, from 186 acres down to 83, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Shane? Yes. Okay. From 275 single-family down to now 120 single units. 150, my apologies. 150. No lots in the wetlands. These are just the notes that I made on the zoning part of it, okay? There's a 100-foot buffer on the highway, am I correct on that? And there will be a buffer between what has been the shooting range and the units that would have homes on them potentially, am I correct on that? Okay. And to address the concern, because obviously, whether we rezone or not, what good does any zoning do if you can't build on it? So, Mr. Shane brought up the environmental part of it, okay, which I was happy to hear, because Dr. Martin, you're bringing up that the environmental issue is there right now. This is not something that this PUD would create an environmental issue. It's there now, okay? I'm sitting here thinking to myself, with Mr. Dean, a point that he made, which is it better to have an opportunity through funding being available privately here to be able to close and clean up the shooting range appropriately? At the same time, obviously, the environmental study needs to be done on any land that would be built on, and it can't be built on in advance of that. Let me finally say that I have a piece of property in my council district. There are no homes on it, but there are a lot of people on it. And it was a site that had problems, creosote problems from years ago. But now, after cleanup, it's been put into usable land, and the city of Slidell has a lot of their buildings for their maintenance division. There's people on that land day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out. And the last thing I would say is this. A concern that I have, if the shooting range were to close, and I don't know that it would, but if it were to close, and this cleanup funding didn't become available with this property, couldn't the children right now from Tuscany walk onto that shooting range and track lead everywhere? So I think Mr. Dean, if I might say, made a good point, and he dealt with this issue, and I think, Doctor, you mentioned that as well, for 8 years. There is an opportunity here, if the council desires, and Mr. Thompson, I don't know what his view is yet, to build less dense have funds available to clean up. And I kind of see it as a win-win situation, because with Tuscany there and no cleanup, I have a concern of what happens if this land just goes fallow. It's not used at all. Doctor, you would admit, it's not gonna, the lead ain't gonna go away on its own.
I think the government would give you an EPA, would give
Excuse me, but if,
I would just say, though, Mr. Chairman, in ending, how long might that take? Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Smith?
Couple of things that come to mind here as it relates to this issue, and as I said in listening to all of the details that were presented to us tonight about the potential environmental impact, I must admit that it really got my attention, because as we talk about the possibility of the lead issue, I don't think there's anything that we should take lightly. And while we would definitely want to promote anything that's going to help keep St. Tammany Parish moving forward, as it regards to revenues from permitting and everything else, we just can't ignore some development issues that kind of stare us in the face. But I'm interested to hear what the justification of the staff report is first, before I go any further from Sydney, and your justification for your recommendation on this issue.
Well, we reviewed in light of the comprehensive rezoning, in which we recommended, and subsequently this property was zoned A2, largely because of the environmental issues in the area. We could find no reason, even though Mr. Shane and his clients worked with us on the design of the PUD, should the council ultimately approve it. We looked at it a number of times and could find no justification for increasing the density.
No justification for what?
For increasing the density in that area.
Thank you. And secondly, to Mr. Shane, what if the lead issues were to be found valid on that property, to exist on that property? Then what would you propose to do as it relates to the development? Or would that come afterwards?
No, sir. What we have suggested and would commit this evening is that before any development would occur on the 116 acres that's part of the PUD before you this evening, that an environmental study would be done as to that 116 acres to confirm that it is in fact appropriate and developable land. If it is not, then obviously not only will Mr. Dorrington or the developer not be able to go forward, there's no lender that would lend money, there's no general contractor that would buy lots, there's no consumer that we would want to sell a home to. So to answer your question, I think at that point we'd have to determine what the issue is, what is the remedy, and would Mr. Dorrington have the economic means to solve the problem?
And finally, in the interest of being a good corporate citizen, would it be something you would consider of doing this impact study before we move to moving this land into a different zone for the proposed development that you're looking to do?
No, sir, we would prefer not to, but not because of defiance. As you can appreciate, a study of that nature would be pretty extensive and very costly. And to not know that at the end of the day that you would be able to sell and develop the land and get a return for the costs that you've expended, it would be just an incredible risk. Again, though, to make sure that we're clear, a shovel will not go in the ground to begin the infrastructure unless the 116 acres that's a part of the PUD is either determined to be suitable or the developer, the owner, take the necessary steps to confirm that it's suitable. We do not want to put anyone at risk, and we don't know that there are risks as it relates to the 116 acres.
Thank you. And with all due respect to my colleagues' comments, about this being a zoning issue, I must admit, having been a native of this parish for 60-something years, and having served on this council in an official capacity in the past, you know, I've seen us do a lot of developments, some good and some bad, that we have lived to regret because we did not exercise caution when caution said we needed to do that. And so I'm having some problems being able to support such a move of zoning change at this time with this potential toxic, and I know that's not a word that wants to be described, but this property situation here on this land. And not only that, the drainage also. As I look at this diagram, I see nothing but wetlands all around this property. And so that tells me, just from my experience of properties in southeast Louisiana and in St. Tammany Parish, you know, just the natural lay of it says to me that this is not property that needs to be developed. And I'll leave it right there for the moment.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a quick follow-up, if Mr. Thompson would agree?
Sure.
In taking the points that were made, I just have a quick question for Mr. Gordon, who I see is our environmental director is back there. Would you mind coming forward, Mr. Gordon? And I'm pretty certain of the answer I'm going to get, but I think it's important for all of us in the public to hear it.
Yes, sir.
When I said zoning, I certainly am interested in the environmental issues, but they're there already, okay? It's there. The doctor admits it. Here's my question. Mr. Shane said a shovel cannot be turned until this land is proven that it's livable, it's usable land. Not only livable, but usable, okay, for people. Is that correct?
I would say that's correct. Yeah, he is probably correct insofar as someone providing financial backing would want to make sure that the property could be properly developed.
But it couldn't be planned, it couldn't be put forward through our parish government without this being safe land. Am I correct?
I would say that you're correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And as far as the wetlands, I just have a quick question. Who would that be for? On the drainage, excuse me. Who? Sydney. Johnny. Yeah, Johnny, I apologize, Johnny, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask the question, Mr. Chairman, while he's walking up here so everybody can hear it.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Johnny, let me ask you this, and I know the answer to this as well. As we build, we can't flood onto other people.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You have to trap your own water plus an additional percentage.
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, Doctor, you're shaking your head no, but that is our law. I realize that. Now, I'm not saying, I hear what you're saying about, well, where does the flooding come from? But, you know, my point is, if they're going to have to show you that if we approve this, that they're going to trap their water and retain an extra percentage of it, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Or they cannot build?
Yes, you cannot have an adverse impact.
And they couldn't build
That's
then?
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question. Sydney, this property is zoned A2 right now. If the developer decided to come in and present a plan to the parish that met the standards of subdivision, we would have to approve it. Is that correct? Okay, so it's not a question, and Dr. Martin's position really is he doesn't want it developed, and I respect that and I understand that. But the reality is this property can be developed under its existing zoning, provided they come in and meet all the specifications and requirements. So that's what this is the argument it's all about. Whether they're going to get a 25% increase or 20% increase on a smaller portion of land for density, or they're going to be forced to develop it under A2. That's my point. Also, Johnny, Mr. Bordelon, I would like you to get someone to investigate the problems that Mr. Fulmer's talking about in Tuscany, to find out what the situation is and why it's that. I'm not certain I know the time frame of when that property was developed, but I'd really like to see a thorough investigation in that. With that, Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, finally. First off, I'd like to thank all my colleagues for y'all's input. I've listened very carefully. I was first made aware of this project, I guess, last October. It was still in Mr. Dean's district at the time. We made the switch in January to the new districts. Everything I've heard and been involved in and seen, and I've been out there numerous times shooting myself. Not shooting myself, but like my gun in. Well, that could happen sometimes too now. But, this property is owned A2. Okay. It can be developed right now as A2. If this passes, over half of it remains A2. Okay? I don't have a problem with that. Secondly, the shooting range has been here as long as I can remember. I look at this as an opportunity to get rid of the shooting range, close it, get it cleaned up. If that doesn't happen, this piece of property is going to sit there. It's never going to get cleaned up. So I don't see any benefit in not overriding this decision. So having said that, I move to override.
We're voting on the rezoning. Take two votes, because we got a public vote after that. Clear.
We're doing item 1 first, right?
All right, voting on item 1, a motion to override, second by Mr. Dean. Vote with your lights on the override of the zoning decision.
Motion passes, 12 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent.
All right, need a motion to introduce an ordinance. Second by Mr. Dean. That's all that's required there. Now, we have to consider the PUD, vote on the PUD. I need a motion to override by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Tanner. Vote on your vote on your buttons.
Motion passes, 12 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent.
All right, and let's see, I need an introduction of an ordinance, right? Yeah, Mr. Thompson, you need to move on an introduction of an ordinance, second by Mr. Tanner, and that's all that's required. Oh, it's going to be a long meeting. Okay, item number 3, applicant Jeff Shane for Joy Hobart, appealing the zoning commission denial on July 3rd, 2012 to rezone 1.44 acres located on the southeast corner of Louisiana 21 and Louisiana Highway 1083 from A2 to HC2. And I believe we have a second case that's in conjunction with this. Applicant attorney Jeff Shane for Ms. Hobart, appealing the zoning commission denial on July 3rd, 2012 to rezone 17.32 acres located on the northwest corner of Louisiana 21 and Louisiana Highway 1083 from A2 to HC2. Mr. Shane?
Yes, sir, I'm coming.
Do we have any opposition to this case? So we have someone. Okay, thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am, I see you.
Good evening again. For the record, Jeff Shane of Jones Fussell of Covington, representing the landowner, Mrs. Joy Hobart. She and her family are with me this evening, seated in the next to last row in the back. And she, of course, owns the tracts that are before you tonight, wherein we seek commercial zoning. Being handed out to you is an email that hopefully all of you received earlier in the week and as well as an attachment, which I think is very important, which will tell you a little bit about what this case is all about. Mrs. Hobart is proud to say that her family, literally her family, has a 140-year history in the Walheim community. And in fact, it's very interesting that she is the descendant of people that homesteaded in that area. And as a result of which, she is probably, if not the largest, certainly one of the largest landowners in that area today, and of course is proud to be a longtime member of the Walheim community. I say that not only because of maybe its sort of unique historical significance, but I think it also tells you a lot about this case, in that Mrs. Hobart literally owns the properties that abut and touch the properties that she hopes to zone this evening. So that although those are not the only properties that perhaps are impacted, it's not as if this is the only property that she owns, and that she's come into the Walheim community as a potential developer, and in fact seeks to make a zoning change from A2 to HC2. In looking at the drawing, let me first identify the properties. To the south, at the corner of Louisiana Highway 1083, which is known as Allen Road in that area, where it intersects Louisiana Highway 21, which is a Bogalusa highway, there's a 1.44 acre parcel that the road runs almost right into the middle of it. That parcel we seek highway commercial zoning. Immediately across Highway 21, you will see a 3.20 acre parcel where we seek HC2 zoning. We had previously sought HC2 zoning for the 6.03 acres, but have withdrawn that request this evening and suggest that it continue to remain the residential zone that it bears now. So no change of zoning for the 6.03 acres. It will stay A2. Where the Bogalusa Highway turns into Ben Williams Road, also known as Louisiana Highway 1083, you'll see that we are requesting a 2.46 acre parcel to be zoned HC2. And then we have another 3.79 acres, which this evening we now withdraw from the petition and request and suggest that it continue to be zoned A2. Finally, the last parcel, 1.84 acres, has a 3,000 square foot warehouse built on it that was built 10 to 12 years ago. It was leased and occupied by the gas company. During the comprehensive process, the landowner did not participate, and apparently the commission and/or the council was not aware that this property should have received, in our view, some form of commercial or industrial zoning because of the presence of the warehouse. We would respectfully request that it be zoned HC2. In fact, we have tenant opportunities that want to use that building again, but cannot procure an occupancy permit because the property is zoned A2, and it will not, the uses do not meet their needs. This case likewise went to the Zoning Commission on July 3, the night where I guess the 6 members were present. The 1.44 acre parcel received a vote of 5 votes for and 1 vote against to change the zoning. The parcels, the parcel across the highway, which at that time we were asking for all 17.5 acres to be zoned HC2, it was defeated. It was I think suggested that had we sought a lesser zone to HC1 that it might have been agreeable with the commission, but the point is it did not receive approval. Both cases again come to you though as a denial because there were not 6 votes.
5 minutes more.
Thank you. Because there were not 6 votes in favor of either proposition. Again, this is a zoning case, and to me, the first and best question in a zoning case, is there a need to make a zoning change at this particular location? Although Walheim is a small community, it's very interesting to see that you have the convergence of really 3 highways in one location. I realize that some would suggest it's Allen Road and Ben Williams Road, but I also tell you that those are state highways that intersect with what is now being recently overlaid and improved Highway 21. And for those of you that don't travel that area often, and I certainly don't, but have over the last 2 months on occasion to look at this property during different traffic conditions, I can assure you, you'd be amazed at the number of people that not only live in the area and come down those roads each day, but the north-south traffic that we have to Washington Parish. Would you believe that if you stood at the intersection of Highway 21 and 1083, where the 1.44 acres is, and I may be off a few tenths, but you have to go 6 to 8 miles to get to Bush, and you have to go 6 to 7 miles to get to Covington, to get to any real commerce, with one significant exception, and that is the parcel next to the 3.20 acres that we're requesting HC2. The parcel to the west of that is in fact the Walheim store, and it is in fact zone HC2. That's another important point, I think, in a zoning case, and that is compatibility and zoning in the area. We have existing HC2 that abuts that parcel. So it's our belief that as a community grows, both now and in the future, the commercial opportunities ought to be in the center of the community. They ought to be on the state highways where they're easily accessible, and we should provide people the opportunity to get their goods and services with not having to travel significant distances. That's what this case is all about. And it's trying to use vision as to what the needs of the community are, not only now, but also in the future. The question may be raised, what does your client hope to build there? We don't have a current building plan for the property today. But we feel that the way development should occur in this parish is for the parish to determine where zoning should be, and that is where the development should follow. And we believe that good case can be made that this is where commercial zoning should be. In closing, let me emphasize, initially between all of these properties, there was approximately 19 acres that were being requested for HC2. Before you tonight, based on the amendments that I have made to the petition, there are only approximately 9 acres that we seek to be zoned HC2, less than half of the initial request. The 2 tracts that are indicated as 6.03 and 3.79 acres will remain in their current A2 status. Based on these reasons, we ask that you consider overriding the recommendation, and based on the amended petition, that you grant HC2 zoning for the 4 tracts as shown on the plat. Thank you for your time.
Okay, we have someone from the opposition that wishes to speak. State your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Yes, good evening. My name is Wayne Worth. I live at 77-181 Highway 21. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I did provide several days ago a written outline of these issues and facts, and I hope that those maps and photographs were helpful as you consider these issues. But tonight I'm not going to just rehash the things you have in front of you, although they may be helpful. But instead I've looked at, and I know you're very familiar with, the New Direction 2025 standards, the policies and statements of fundamental principles. There's 4 that I want to talk about tonight because they were established by your group many years ago, and they guide you in many of your decisions. And I think you'll relate the photographs and the points I made in the written presentation to these, and then I'll address some of Mr. Sheehan's issues. First of all, the number 1, page 4, land use considerations. It says that the development of existing commercial uses should be encouraged before new areas are allowed. Well, you'll see in my written presentation that less than 2 miles away, the foresight of the Planning Commission, established a large HC2 zone, and that was to be developed, and it has not yet been developed. I would suggest to you that to be consistent with that principle, you would want to favor the existing HC2 as a point of development. I'll deal with the predictions of growth Mr. Sheehan brought up a little later. Item 2, the parish should not permit spot zoning. Well, obviously, that's exactly what's being discussed here. And spot zoning is a slippery slope I'm sure you want to avoid in this and many other cases. It favors one man's land over another. It raises the value of one man's land at the expense of another. There's injustice in that, and I don't think that that's what we want to underwrite. Number 3 in the list of principles is that commercial institutions should be located on major highways or crossroads within planned districts. Well, 1083, when you look at the reference maps prepared by the land planning group, is not now or foreseen for the next, well, 2025 was their target date, a road of high use. And it is not now. It's a country road leading from farmland to farmland, which is a nice road, but very lightly used. It should not be considered as a major crossroad. And perhaps, as I said in my written report, the decisions of the Corps for their bypass in the years ahead will make this prediction of a important area of commerce even less believable. It just won't happen. Number 4 is that the parish and its municipality should take to develop or redevelop existing commercial areas. In my written presentation, we photographed existing commercial businesses, as Mr. Sheehan pointed out, in Bush and at the juncture of 190 and 21. Excuse me, I'm taking a little medicine. It makes my mouth dry, and being in front of you doesn't make it any easier. Excuse me. So the people who own the shopping center at 190 and 21 and have had a leasing sign forever, by the way, I have 20 years in commercial shopping center development in the Northeast. That was my background. And so I'm aware of the concerns of property owners. I take that to heart. But those property owners are struggling for tenants now. You will dilute the pool of prospective tenants for that property owner if you approve this, which is why I'm asking you to support planning and zoning. Furthermore, when you go to Bush, the photographs in my written presentation show you closed stores and other, actually it wasn't all the way to Bush, it was 5.5 miles, but other businesses which are scrambling to find tenants, a closed grocery store, for example. I would just suggest to you that if you approve this, you are giving a green light to dilute the value of other people's land, to take away potential tenants for that land. And actually, and I've been involved in this, what will happen between the two H2 zones will that when a leasee comes about, when a tenant surfaces, they will pit the two landowners against each other and play them off to get the lowest possible rent. That's what a developer does. Now, if there are any questions with what I've already said, I'd be happy to respond to them. If not, I'd just like to say 2 things that Mr. Sheehan brought up. One, he seems to indicate that 6 good people on the planning board couldn't come to a good decision. They lacked the wisdom of the balance of the board. Actually, if these 2 issues, and I say this in the written response, had been kept separate, the advice and the recommendations of the land planners would have been heard, and I believe a much stronger vote would have been taken amongst 10 or 6. But because it was condensed, these people were only allowed to voice their objection. So perhaps if things were different, shoulda, woulda, coulda, we would have had a much stronger vote for you to consider their denial. And I would suggest even today, and especially in light of all of the changes that have just been handed you that I've never seen, and the other people that I've been speaking with at Whippoorwill and Grundy Hills and all of, no one has any idea what this new proposal is. If you are undecided tonight to back planning and zoning, before you would commit this in the law, in the zone, forever, as a highway commercial zone, you should at least return it to the people to reconsider and have a voice in this very different presentation now made that I still haven't seen. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue in opposition? Come on up, ma'am. And as is customary, please state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Elizabeth Lemoyne. I live at 81073 Osprey Drive, Bush. It's really Walheim, but post office is Bush. I didn't intend to speak tonight, but there was one thing that was mentioned earlier, that the warehouse that is built on 1083 runs, it's also called Ben Williams Road. It's approximately 6 miles long. It runs from 21 to 40. There is a warehouse that is built on there, and I think the attorney said that they can't rent it if the zoning isn't changed. Well, I wonder how that building got on the property in the first place if it isn't zoned for commercial building. So that was my one comment I wanted to make. And then also, if we knew, I also live in Whippoorwill, if we knew what was being planned for the area, it might be a different situation for us to say okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Mr. Shane, how much time does Mr. Shane have left? 4 minutes for rebuttal.
Excuse me. Thank you. With regard to Ms. Lemoyne's question, which is a great question, the building was built at a time when it was legal. I procured a conditional use permit under your prior zoning ordinance, which was allowed. When Entex vacated, there have been other tenants that were in the property legally from time to time. After the last tenant left and the property was zoned through comprehensive zoning to A2, it's now impossible to get an occupancy permit for a commercial, or let us say any use other than a residential use in this 3,000 square foot building. I think that's a very compelling reason when you know that the building was built, I think, in 1998 or 99 and was occupied for a good 10 or so years by various tenants. While we would like to see, my client would like to see that building put back in service, but hopefully you would understand the appropriateness of zoning the property in that regard. With all due respect to Mr. Worth's comments, I recognize that beauty is always in the eyes of the beholder, and although I appreciate his expertise and experience in the Northeast, this is Walheim, and what we think, those of us that have lived here a long time, not just Ms. Hobart, we know that that is a growing community. And I believe that one of the responsibilities that you have as a council is to at least consider opportunities for commercial development if they are in fact, and I'll now refer to some of the principles in 2025, on state highways, in areas where we have major crossroads, where it is not necessarily classic spot zoning. Please remember that there's an existing HC2 zone parcel that immediately abuts the track on the north side of Highway 21, and particularly where we know that the developed commercial properties are 5.5 miles away to Bush and approximately 6 miles or so at Claiborne Hill. I didn't say there might not have been another parcel zoned commercially, but it's not developed. So the point is that if we want to provide not only for the needs of the people now, but maybe more importantly, the needs of the people in the future, I believe that any blueprint, and this is not a criticism of 2025 or comprehensive zoning, these matters change. And I don't think it's unfair for a landowner to ask you to re-examine a zoning that's previously been assigned. I don't suggest that the prior zoning assigned was wrong or bad. I only tell you that I don't think it took into consideration what I hope are compelling reasons for you to consider making the zoning change this evening. Also, let me say that we listened to the concerns of the other residents in the Walheim community. And I think it's very significant that we diminish this request from an aggregate 19 acres to approximately 9 acres of HC2. Again, that was our way of listening to what the people were saying and try to find, obviously, a position in between. And you'll notice that the parcels we selected are of a size and of a configuration and at junctions of the state highways that make sense where the commerce should be. So we ask you, again, to override and grant the HC2 this evening on those 4 parcels. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You have rebuttal time. Come on up.
I won't take a lot more of your time. You do deal with very weighty issues here. But let me just say, first of all, that we are not a group of naysayers who don't see the positive nature of growth in our community. We strongly backed, my wife came here to support the Alexander Milne home, which was a very substantial change in property use directly across from where we live. After that was done, by the way, we, as Dr. Sanders, who operated a medical practice close to our property, went out of business. I bought his land, and because we have a residential zoning, I converted that commercial property, which could have been furthered, and that with professional use with his certifications and such. But anyway, I could have used that, but I reverted that property to residential zoning because it's your zones. These are the zones that we live with. This is the prediction. I have a covenant with this organization that you will establish zones and stand by them and not change them because someone simply asked for them. And by the way, I know Joy and her husband Stan, these are wonderful people, and this is not going to go well. But they are really pillars, in the community, and but zoning will become law, and you will change something forever that is in direct 180 degrees from your foundation of principle and the guidance that's offered in the zoning guidelines. So just please keep that in mind. I think I can conclude, unless there's any question about where many of the neighbors I spoke with, what their feelings are.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close the floor and then open it up to discussion amongst the council members. Mr. Tanner, you have anything to say?
There we go. I appreciate the people from Walheim area coming down and voicing their opinion. I have worked with the petitioners and with Mr. Shane on changing this 19 acres of property from down to 9 pieces of 4 different pieces, creating some 9 acres of highway commercial. One, I like to say that zoning is not forever, because if it was forever, where you live and all along where you live and where the building is that's there now that was put there because of the fact that it was zoned suburban agriculture, all of that area would be subject to all kind of development, because at one time it was zoned suburban agriculture. But now it's been changed to A2, and now it's being requested to be changed to highway commercial. It could come back 10 years from now and be asked to be zoned institutional, for that matter. So, I mean, it's not forever, but we do think it's for the future. And I just want to give the rest of my colleagues a little example here. And, of course, I shouldn't say this because, of course, oh, it's evident, hell, I'm old. But anyway, I've been here a long time, and when I came to the Lee Road area, which is where Highway 437, Highway 1129, and Highway 40 come together, we had one general store. And as we grew and what have you, we now have 3 large service stations, a welding shop, a feed store, a bank, a barber shop, a dollar store, and coming soon, a supermarket, plus a meat market and a CPA who have offices there. So the people move to an area they need and they want services. Now, Ms. Hobart and her family are not saying that we need 3 large service stations, a supermarket, and all this stuff at this location now. But it's certainly, if you got any vision as to what's going to happen in this parish over the next 20 to 30 years, you're going to realize that you need places that you can put this type of business so the people in the neighborhood can use it. To give you an example, the dollar store at Lee Road is being expanded, increased 5 times the size it is now because of the amount of business that it has there. And Lee Road's not any different than, actually, Waldheim is more populated and what have you, in a better service area as far as getting to than Lee Road community, as a Barker's Corner, as we call it. So I think this is, and I know these people do not have anything in mind to come. And I know that you could put things like, I see a thing where, you could put a Sonic there. Golly, wouldn't that be terrible if you put a Sonic out there? You know, we used to have a malt stand and a hamburger shop at Barker's Corner too, but went out of business because Sonic come to town. So, I mean, you know, the people that developed this have a little intelligence too, and they're not going to develop it until the time comes that if there's a need for it. Now, you see some areas that were developed along 21 that have gone out of business because it wasn't the time to do it. Okay? But this, we're not asking you to build a service station. We're not asking you to do anything except let's rezone this so when the time comes that it can be done. And I'm in favor of changing the request from what it was originally went to the Board of Planning Commission and to override the Planning Commission and to develop these 4 pieces of highway commercial too.
All right, as a clarification, I hear a motion to, I need to clarify which pieces we're talking about rezoning. And they're going to have to be 2 separate votes because
Okay,
it's 2
the
separate
first one,
cases.
let's do the first one, which is the first appeal, which is the 1.44 acres at the corner of 1083, which is Allen Road, and 21. It's the 1.44 acres.
And that's the first case?
Yes, sir.
All right, so your motion is to override?
Yes, sir.
And a second by Mr. Thompson. Any other discussion? All right, vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
Okay, you need to introduce an ordinance? Mr. Tanner? Mr. Tanner, introduce an ordinance, second by Mr. Thompson. Okay, now, let's go to the next case. And which pieces are we talking about?
All right, out of the diagram that you have in front of you,
Right?
we're talking
Turn your mic on, please.
8C2, 1.84 acres, that's where the warehouse is now and has been being used for commercials for some time. That particular piece, the 8C2 proposed 2.46 acres right at the corner of 1083 and 21, and the piece right next to the current 8C2 property, which is 3.2 acres, directly across from the 1.44 we just did.
All right, so you're moving to override?
Yes, sir.
All right, I need a second. Mr. Thompson?
Marty, I've had my light
Gene.
on.
Sorry.
That's all right. When I'm looking at this, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm wondering why the 3.79 acre piece was pulled out, when it would make more sense to me if those three parcels were together, because what's going to happen once this land does get developed, since the 1.84 already has a structure on it, then you skip 3.79, come to the 2.46, which makes sense at that intersection of 21 and 1083. It's logical to me that the 3.79 would be, someone's going to come in for a change on that in a short period of time after that piece gets developed. So I'm just wondering why it was pulled out.
Mr. Shane?
We felt after listening to the zoning commission discussion and the concerns of the other residents that Ms. Hobart and her family live with in Walheim, that it really was not necessary to zone that property at this time. We wanted to make sure they understood that there was a fear that if a larger tract was zoned, that it might be suggestive of a strip center development at this time, a long linear piece. That, again, is not the plan. So we really wanted to withdraw it to evidence, I guess, our good faith, or back up, if you will, the statements that we're making, that we would like what we think are 4 strategic locations, but not at this point ask for the linear zoning.
All right. Need to vote with your lights on the override?
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Move on the ordinance, Mr. Tanner, second by Mr. Sharp. Okay, that concludes our appeals. We'll move along. I'm going to make a request that we move up item number 31 from the ordinances for approval. It's ordinance calendar number 4839. It involves the voting, the absentee voting proposal. Second by Mr. Grovey. Vote with your lights. We moved up item number 4839. All right, thank you. Tally the vote.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Okay, ordinance calendar number 4839, ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding between Louisiana Department of State and the Parish Registrar of Voters for establishment and operation of an additional parish early voting location. I met with Mr. Wall, or spoke with Mr. Wall about this, and he has, and we discussed in the last agenda review meeting the possibility of amending the voting location on this item. What Mr. Wall thinks can work for his department is to move the voting location to here at Coop Drive. The facility's already set up to handle this type of voting. In fact, this is one of the voting precincts. The other thing is that it's a better location as for access. I believe it'll serve more people by being here. I have that, an amendment to that effect. I'd like the council to consider to approve that amendment, and then we discuss whether or not we indeed are even going to move forward with this. So, motion by Mr. Canulet, second by Mr. Belisario. You should have a copy of the amendment in front of you. Vote with your lights on the amendment to move the voting location to here, Coop Drive.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Okay. Mr. Wall, state your case.
Yes, sir. During the last presidential election, we had a substantial turnout in the early voting process. We believe, just to put it shortly, that we need an additional location in St. Tammany Parish. The state has piloted other locations in other parishes, East Baton Rouge being one of the major locations at their Essen Lane Archives location. And we believe that an additional site here in St. Tammany would help relieve some of those issues of people and afford more of an opportunity for the people of St. Tammany Parish that want to participate in the early voting process to vote. This location offers a central site, and we believe we could work within this area and this location to provide that service for the citizens.
All right, Mr. Wall, are you aware that part of the amendment was that we limit the use of this facility for early voting to major elections? Basically, you're talking about your legislative cycle and also the presidential race.
Yes, sir.
And you're good with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to open discussion up to the floor. Ask any questions that you may. Mr. Tanner?
And I like the amendment, Mr. Good, but my question is, does it change the cost of this since we're using our building and what have you now?
No, sir, not at all.
Still going to be $30,000 a year?
Yes, sir.
No, not 30 a year.
No.
It's going to be.
We already have the lines here.
We have, all the lines are in place. I'm sorry to jump in on
No,
you,
that's
but I want to explain it to you. The cost of the setup as far as here is going to be nothing. The cost of purchasing the extra machines, that's an initial upfront cost. That won't be the same thing every time we have an election. Once we have the machines, the capital expense has been made, and then it's just a matter of whatever it costs to run a polling place.
Yes, sir.
Which I believe is, Mr. Wall, how much at this point?
It's manning it with commissioners.
Right.
And the state will provide those commissioners. It does bill back that cost to the election, but the state does upfront that cost for commissioners
Okay,
to
so
man that
it's
location.
so we recapture that money regardless. We're not expending anything at that point. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand
Well,
your question.
what I'm trying to get to is what is it going to cost, once we pay for the machines, what is it going to cost for each election?
Just the maintenance of that data line, that secure data line through the state.
We have to do that already because this is a polling place. Mr. Tanner, is that it?
That's fine, thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Stefanczyk?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I really think that we should spell out what we mean by major elections. I know what you have said, but that's not part of this ordinance, and unless you've got some kind of sidebars on it that tell you that, I think that can be misinterpreted somewhere in the future.
Mr. Hand?
I would hope that we would make certain that we say it's for either parish-wide elections or for, I mean, that to me would be the thing, parish-wide elections. I don't think that.
You want a
we should have
definition, I get
other
it.
things.
Yeah, that's fine, and the understanding is parish-wide elections, and it's going to be for presidential primary. That covers what I consider to be major
Presidential elections. correct?
presidential elections, so
Not
let's make sure that's
presidential
understood as a definition.
Okay.
Do we need to do, all right, we need to do an amendment to add that clarification.
Then I would
Mr.
so move.
Stefanczyk, second by Ms. O'Brien. Vote on the amendment, please.
Discuss it. I want to discuss that, please. Parish-wide elections mean if, for example, if the school board put a millage thing on the ballot, that would be a parish-wide election?
That's correct.
You know, you got 12,000, 15,000 people vote in the whole parish, and I don't think that's necessary for those type of parish-wide elections. I believe it'd be better off, and I think, Wayne, maybe you disagree with me, I don't know, tell me if you do, it doesn't, but if it was a statewide election, that way you got, you know, all of the governors, lieutenant governors, and all that kind of stuff, and you got a bigger turnout than you would have for, and it's also the same time that we would be running, the parish president would be running, the sheriff, and everybody else. The rest of the parish-wide elections would normally be some kind of bond issue or, you know, something of that nature. So I don't know if you could call every parish election a major election. That's my
Well,
point.
the difference here is it really doesn't matter because the man's telling us it's not going to cost us anything. Maintenance of the lines once we buy the machines. And parish-wide elections impact everyone, and location is so good that it's going to make it very convenient and encourage more people to vote. I know where I live, it'd be wonderful to pop over here and vote. You know, and same thing with the people in Abita, even going west or going east. But the bottom line is that our initial expenditure of the buying the machines is the only cost that we're going to bear over and above what we're going to be doing. That's the way I see it.
Right, and
Yeah,
we did,
I wanted to watch that we don't get into the runoffs where there might be, you know, when you have the gubernatorial election or you have the running for the, you know, President of the United States or something, that's one thing. But the next month when we have the runoff elections for the people who didn't make it on the first ballot, and then when
Right.
we have a Secretary of State, I don't want to have a parish-wide election for that one office. I would not be opposed to having one for a parish-wide school board election, okay, which is parish-wide whenever they have it.
Right.
But then again, once you go past that to the next time and you only have, say you elect half of them and the other half don't, then it's not parish-wide anymore. And I think that's what I'm trying to look
All right,
at.
I'm
is
going to
to
ask
say-
you, do you want to rephrase your amendment? Or, because you said all parish-wide elections?
Well, to me, there's only 2 or 3 parish-wide elections.
Well, it's statewide. When you have state elections with the state reps and the governor and senate,
That's
it's
that's a
yeah.
parish-wide election.
Yes,
Right.
but so to me, it's predicated on ours and the state.
Yeah, but it's a parish-wide election.
Right.
Everybody in the parish can vote on that.
Once you get into a-
Once you get into anything else, it's not a
Correct.
parish-wide election. That's why I said it has to be parish-wide.
Right.
And yes, there could be a situation, Richard, where we have an election that goes on parish-wide for a millage, but most of our millages now, we've asked them to put it down to once or twice a year so that they vote on 10 or 15 of them or whatever it is, if it's parish-wide. Now, if it's a FAR district doing it, well, then no.
No.
But if it's a
Right.
a millage that we're going to ask for parish-wide, that might make sense.
Right.
That's the only thing I'm looking at.
And that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's the way I would like to see.
Gene, you want to comment on the amendment?
No, I wanted to comment on what Steve said. I think it's just interpretation when he was saying with the school system, with their elections, they're by district when they have, for all 15 districts when they vote. So, and those are only when there's opposition candidates in those.
Right.
So he's clarified it where he's really talking about the
Right.
parish-wide elections and not really the school board elections.
Chris?
Yeah. If we do what we're supposed to do as a council, we're only going to have 2 elections a year, hopefully. We said we were going to consolidate it, and where better than to have an election in the office, in this building, that the people own. I mean, it's their, this is theirs. This ain't ours, it's theirs. This is a perfect place for them to vote. It just works out.
All right, please vote on the amendment. Yeah, we're set up for it here.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Okay, now, let's vote on the amended ordinance creating or establishing a absentee voters location here at Coop Drive. And by the way, I checked, it will not interfere with anything that we have going on this year for the presidential primary. So vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I do have one question that I want to just make sure we have this situation where the presidential is November 6th. We have a subsequent runoff election if there were to be a runoff in the congressional. If by definition of what your amendment just did, would we have the voting here if it was only the town of Abita Springs that had a runoff election?
The congressional election would be a parish-wide election because it's the entire parish. So I would say, yeah, you'll probably
So it would follow the general subsequent, yeah, because,
no.
The answer is no for the mayor of Abita Springs.
But the congressional election, if it were a runoff,
okay.
which is I haven't seen it happen in a
We
very
just
long
need to
time.
know how to publish, because if that situation does come up, you know, for the federal, of course, we would have it, but if it was just the runoff in Abita, we would need to know not to have it, so.
Correct.
Mr.
Correct.
Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Dean.
I foresee some problems with this, and the reason is that he doesn't need to be calling us and asking us, by the way, you know, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about, you know, let's allow him to give some leeway, and if it causes problems, then if we feel like we need to control everything, then we can get involved. But it worries me that he's asking this question, because they're going to be, I mean, Dwayne, it's going to be
Right,
50
if we-
different
if we
scenarios that you may
advertise-
have questions about.
Correct. If we advertise for the primary, it should pertain to the general as well.
Well, I'll tell you
give
what.
him some
Although
leeway.
it may not have.
Let's get through this first election. In the meantime, sit down with Terry and Mr. Han and go through the scenarios, and if we need to come back and clean it up a little bit, we can do that. Is that agreed to, gentlemen and ladies?
All righty. And we also request expedited service to Department of Justice so we can get this in motion.
We'll get it going as quick as we can. I'll
Thank
try
you.
to sign the ordinance tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving along, going back to the ordinances for adoption. Ordinance calendar number 4771, ordinance to amend the Parish Unified Development Code regarding outdoor advertising billboards. We need to table this. Second, yeah, correct, postpone. Second by Mr. Canulet. Vote with your lights on postponement until the next meeting.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4807, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 37,270 square feet from NC4 to HC2. This is in Ward 3, District 2. Mr. Sharp, second by Mr. Dean. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4808, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 2.179 acres from A1 to A1 and a mobile home overlay. And this is Ward 2, District 3. Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Dean. Vote with your lights, please.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4809, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 15.14 acres from A4A to A4A with a mobile home overlay. Ward 8, District 14. Mr. Smith?
Move to adopt.
And second by Mr. Artigue. Vote with your lights, please.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4810, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 12,500 square feet from A3 to A3 and a mobile home overlay, Ward 9, District 14. Mr. Smith?
Move to adopt.
And second by Mr. Ortiz again. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4811, ordinance to amend the St. Tammany Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1, Section 5.19A, Planned Business Campus relative to height regulations. This actually needs to be amended. Right now, we're proposing that we limit the height to 70 feet. When you do the math of how many feet it takes to do, say, 6 stories, we got to go to 75. So I'm going to ask somebody to make that 75. Second by Mr. Smith, moved on by Mr. Belisario. Vote on the amendment, please.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Okay, and since this is less restrictive, let's vote on the ordinance for PVC 1. Vote with your lights. Oh, excuse me. Somebody wants to move on this? Second by Mr. Bender. Now you can vote with your lights. Belisario, yeah.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4813 AA, ordinance to amend the St. Tammany Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1, zoning, Section 5.2702, MD1, and Section 52802, MD2, relative to permitted uses. Need a motion? Second by Mr. Bender. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4814, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1 acre from A3 to NC1, Ward 8, District 8. And second by Mr. Belisario. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4815 AA, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1.97 acres from HC2 to HC2 and a rural overlay. And this is Ward 8, District 14.
Move to adopt.
Second by Mr. Ortiz. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4816, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify .5108 acre from A3 to A3 with a mobile home overlay, Ward 8, District 13. Mr. Ortiz?
So moved.
Second by Mr. Smith. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4817, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1 acre from A1A to HC2, Ward 3, District 3. Mr. Thompson? Second by Mr. Tanner. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4818, ordinance to amend the St. Tammany Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1, to add a new zoning classification, Section 5.21A, HC2A, Highway Commercial District. I believe we have an amendment for this. Is that correct, Sidney?
Yeah, and because of the questions about the number of pumps that would be allowed, we added some clarification language that I think would be considered a technical amendment. Under item 2, convenience stores, add the language inclusive of the limitation on the number of fuel pump units permitted based upon the parcel size. The standards have 3 different parcel sizes with 3 different levels of pumps based upon that parcel size.
This would be consistent with the HC2?
The existing HC2. It resulted in there'd be no difference between convenience stores for HC2 and HC3 relative to the pumps.
Okay, I need a motion on that first.
I just wanted to clarify, because he's at HC3, I think she's talking HC2 and HC2A.
2A.
Where it'd either be 4, 6, or 8 pumps.
4, 6, or 8, depending on the parcel size.
All right, give me
exactly.
I got a
So
motion by
moved.
Mr. Stefanczyk, second by Mr. Belisario. See, we have someone appears to want to speak. Come on up, sir.
Council Chairman, members of the council, my name's Ross Lagarde. I'm representing Blossman Oil and Slidell Oil Company. I just need to clarify something, I believe, with Sydney, but I don't know the protocol here.
Go ahead and ask the question, sir.
We're not amending Section 8.01, subpart AX, relative to the fuel pumps, the number of fuel pumps.
No, that would remain the same. What this does is make sure that that same subsection
Right.
is also applicable to the new zoning district.
I just didn't see the amendment in writing, so I didn't know where it was
Yeah,
going.
we're
It's
putting
going
it in
into
there.
the
What we're going
ordinance.
to do is follow up with an amendment to that section to make it abundantly clear that it's intended for both these districts.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
I got a question.
Mr. Dean?
Sydney, in HC3, where would it go? Number of pumps?
There is no limit. I think that was the intention of the original AX, which is where the limits are, because HC3 is up to 200,000 square feet. When you're talking near big boxes and those types of zoning districts, it's extremely intense commercial. And if I remember the discussions on the pumps, the intent was not to limit the pumps in those districts. So those larger stations who would like to do the really large convenience stores would have to locate in HC3.
Can you see, hang on, can you see us down the road possibly re-looking at HC2A? Because there is going from 8 pumps to unlimited, but you have to have HC3 at least, correct? I mean, in other words, we're doing the same thing. You know, we were limited to 40,000 square feet, now we're going up to 75. There's a possibility we may want to look at maybe some different uses of HC2A.
If the council would like to look at that, we can look at it and discuss it. I mean, we're increasing the size of the stores, the pumps would stay the same under the present ordinance, the present amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. All right. Okay, I don't see any lights. Vote with your lights on the amendment.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, because this is not a substantive change, we can vote on this tonight. A motion by Mr. Canulette, second by Mr. Belisario. Any other discussion? Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4820, ordinance to extend for 6 months. Excuse me? Did I? Oh, okay. I was leaving you out, Mr. Smith. Ordinance calendar number 4819, ordinance to rescind ordinance Council Series number 11-2631, adopted November 3rd, 2011, authorizing the placement of no parking signs on both sides of the entrance of John Smith Road, Ward 8, District 14.
Move to adopt.
Second by Mr. Bender. Vote with your lights. Sorry about that.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4820, ordinance to extend for 6 months the moratorium on multifamily structures on property within unincorporated areas of Council District number 12. Mr. Bender? Yes, so moved. Second by Mr. Artigue. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4821, ordinance to extend for 6 months the moratorium Town of Alton subdivision, Ward 9, District 14. Mr. Smith? Second by Mr. Artigue. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4823, ordinance to correct the road and drainage inventory to include an extension of Max Jude Lane, Ward 4, District 5. Mr. Thompson, will you move on this for me, please? And second by Mr. Tanner. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4824, ordinance to amend Parish Code, Chapter 20, Roads and Bridges, Article 3, Road Lighting Districts, Section 20-204, District number 4, to amend the boundaries thereof. Need motion by Mr. Groby, second by Mr. Smith. Vote with your lights. No?
I'm missing something. This is lighting district number 4 we're amending?
That's what it looks like.
And what are
Is that
we
correct?
doing to it?
Yeah. You want to
We're adding
explain it,
in what?
Jake?
If I understand it, this is we're finally putting to bed the amendment to changing and incorporating the strip of 1088 up by the high school to
It's
amend
not
the
lighting
lighting district.
district number 4, is it?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Is that the
It said-
809? Huh?
Highway 11, changing boundaries.
It's Highway
It's
11.
to take in the full interchange at Highway 11.
The interchange is Highway 11, okay. That's in District 4. I was thinking it was the one in 1088, and I'm saying that's a different lighting.
So it's not any private property, it's just that
No, okay.
interchange.
So we got a
Okay, well,
different
thank you.
for you, Jake. Okay. So, all right, we have a motion and a second. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4825, ordinance to authorize parish president to acquire by donation certain water lines, a sewer force main, a lift station, and all related equipment. I need someone to move on that. Mr. Groby, second by Mr. Thompson. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay. Ordinance calendar number 4826, ordinance to authorize parish president to purchase or otherwise acquire certain parcels, rights-of-ways, and/or servitudes for the Grand Avenue Bridge project. A motion by Mr. Bender, second by Mr. Smith. Vote with your lights, please.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4827, ordinance to authorize parish president to purchase and/or otherwise acquire certain parcels, rights-of-way, and/or servitudes for the Oak Street Bridge project.
So moved.
Second by Mr. Smith. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4828, ordinance to authorize parish president to purchase or otherwise acquire certain servitudes for drainage improvements for the Country Club Drive project. Need somebody to move on this. Mr. Tanner, second by Mr. Dean. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4829, ordinance to authorize the parish president to transfer the property and improvements for the interchange improvements at Louisiana US 11 project to the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development.
So moved.
By Mr. Saponzik and second by Mr. Smith. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance ordinance calendar number 4830, ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 16, providing for the amendment of the boundaries of Rec District Number 1 and Rec District Number 10, and to provide for repeal, severability, and date of enactment. Mr. Thompson, you want to move on that? Second by Mr. Dean. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4831, ordinance to authorize the parish president to acquire by donation certain movable and immovable assets from High Rollers Investments LLC. This is in my district. Mr. Thompson, will you move on that? And second by Mr. Tanner. Vote with your light. The High Rollers. The High Rollers. High Rollers.
Motion is
No,
unanimous, one
out of
absent.
town Brown. Ordinance calendar number 4832, ordinance to authorize the parish president to transfer a portion of the Slidell levy, also known as Schneider Canal levy, and improvements to the city of Slidell. It's by Mr. Bender, second by Mr. Canulette. Vote with your lights, please. No.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4833, an ordinance to authorize the parish president to accept the act of dedication and donation of West Shore Drive. Need a motion? Mr. Stefanczyk, second by Mr. Canulette. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
I want to make a comment. When we have these types of items that are put on here, I would like to know the location of the district, which district it's in the future as a matter of clarification. Okay? Thank you. All right, ordinance calendar number 4834, ordinance to amend ordinance council series number 10-2384 regarding the Huntwick Village drainage improvement project. I need a motion by Mr. Stefanczyk, and I believe this is in your district now, Mr. Smith? Okay. Oh.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4836, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 85.311 acres to a PUD, District, Ward 1, District 1. Mr. Dean? Mr. Thompson. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4837, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 85.311 acres from A3 to TND1 to NTND1 to A4, A8, and HC1, Ward 1, District 3. Mr. Thompson? Second by Mr. Dean. That was a mouthful.
Mr. Thompson? Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, ordinance calendar number 4838, ordinance to impose 6-month moratorium within a portion of voting precinct 914, Ward 8, District 14. Mr. Smith?
I move on it.
Second by Mr. Artigue. Vote with your lights, please.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right, we did 31. Ordinance calendar number 4840, ordinance to amend the 2012 operating budget, amendment number 6. Need a motion? Mr. Belisario, second by Mr. Tanner. Vote with your lights on the amendment. The amended ordinance.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Ordinance calendar number 4841, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1 acre from A3 to A3 and with a mobile home overlay. This is Ward 6, District 11, by Mr. Stefanczyk, second by Mr. Artigue. Vote with your lights.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
All right, moving on to nominations. Nominate 2 individuals to appoint to the Board of Commissioners of the St. Tammany Rec District Number 16. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, we want to table this again, but we are happy to report that we do have another person that's being considered for nomination, but they do have a quorum in order to have the official meetings.
Okay, well, we'll postpone that till the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
And second by Mr. Canulette. Let's vote with our lights, please.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, nominate individuals for the appointment of the Board of St. Tammany Parish Developmental District. We've got 4 appointments. We can take the nominations tonight. I need a motion to open the floor on nominations by Mr. Canulette, second by Mr. Stefanczyk. Vote to open up the floor. Okay, I'm going to start.
Wait, I'm missing somebody. Mr. Sharp?
Mr. Sharp, we need you to vote. Thank you.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, I'm going to start with Mr. Dean. Do you have anyone to nominate? Mr. Sharp? Peter Egan. Okay. Mr. Thompson? Mr. Tanner? Mr. Groby? I've got three. Jason Cobb, Kristen McLaren, and Hank Miltonberger. Chris? Gene?
They have three. They have Martin Bruno, John Smith, Keith Baker.
Okay. Mrs. O'Brien? Mr. Stefanczyk? Mr. Bender?
Yes, I have one, Mr. Dave Kaufman.
Dave Kaufman, okay. Richard? Mr. Smith?
Yes, I have one, Mr. John Murchison.
John Murchison, okay. Do I have a motion to close the floor? All right, vote with your lights. All right.
Mr. Smith.
Ms.
Motion
Brister?
is unanimous, one absent.
Ms. Brister?
I just wanted to speak after you finish this motion. We have 7 members now appointed to that board, so I was going to read those names just so everybody would know who's on there.
Please do so.
So my 4 appointments, Michael Tusa, who's an attorney in Abita Springs, Randy Lawshay is an accountant, lives in Pearl River, Bill Davis, who is the CEO of Slidell Memorial Hospital, who has an accounting background, Luther Traylor, he's a retired director of finance in the Navy. He worked at Stennis. He's from Slidell also. Those are the 4 from the President's office.
So we have 3 from Slidell.
We have 3 from Slidell and 1 from Abita Springs.
Okay.
In that group.
Thank you.
In EDF appointments are Peter Link, who's Vice President of First Bank and Trust. He lives in Covington. Chad Collins, who's an attorney. He's in Mandeville. And Eric Schwest of Clico, who is in Mandeville. So those are the 7 we have right now.
Okay. I don't know Mrs. Zollinger's first name. John Solinger. Okay. Mr. Bender neglected to nominate a person from Mr. Falconer.
I apologize,
So
Mr.
I need a
Falconer.
motion to reopen.
Reopen.
Nominations. Vote with your lights to reopen.
Mr. Thompson. Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, make your nomination.
Yes, sir, Mr. Falconer's out of town. He would like to nominate, and I'll nominate on his behalf, Mr. John Zollinger.
Okay.
Marty. He also had one of them was Nixon Adams.
Nixon Adams as well?
Yes.
Okay.
What was your third one, Marty?
My third one was Hank Miltonberger. He owns Gill's Bar. All right, motion to close the nominations, please. And second by Canulet. Vote with your lights. That was Mr. Thompson that moved.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Mrs. Brister, this has to lay over for, what, 30 days, right? No, I haven't gotten the cap. Is it 30 days or till the next meeting?
It's to the next meeting.
Till the next
Mr.
meeting.
Gould.
Well,
Yes,
my
sir.
question was going to be, can we do this at the special meeting on the 29th?
Yes, you can.
It fits. Okay. I would suggest that we put it on the calendar vote for the 29th. That way, the training can be done quicker.
Right, and they're waiting for the names to set up training for
Okay.
that period, so.
All
They
right.
have their first meeting on the 8th of this month, but we have a quorum with all 7 of these people.
Okay, next set of appointments, resolution to appoint at least 3 members to the Community Action Agency Advisory Board. 1 or more representatives of low-income individuals, 2 or more from public and private organizations. We need a motion to open up the, let's see, well, we have nominations.
We already have the nominations.
Okay, so what we're going to need to do is, we've got 1, 2, wait a minute,
Marty, let me explain something. Is John Tobin still here? Okay. One of the things that I've learned
have
since I've
two
been on the
people
Community Action Advisory Board, Marty and the rest of the council members, we have always looked at the minimum threshold. We can go to 30 people on the Community Action Advisory Board, and we have four people to be appointed, and I'd like to move forward to appoint all four of them, which puts us one over the minimum. And one key thing we want to be able to have is for anything that has to be approved, that we have a quorum, and this will assist us in that kind of a situation.
Okay, that's your motion to appoint
Yes.
all four?
Yes.
Second by Ms. O'Brien. All right. Vote with your lights, please. Yeah.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Next item is resolution to appoint 5 members to the St. Tammany Parish Commission on Cultural Affairs. We have nominations. It's Simone Burke, Stephen Cephalou, Lisa Barnett, Scarlett Rohogan, Kelly Elliott, and Jennifer Besh. Jean, you have somebody that's here that's been nominated, right?
We have one that's here, Scarlett.
Okay, that's right. Ms. Scarlett, would you like to come up and speak with us? Thank you for being so patient, waiting for all of this.
Thank you so much for letting me speak to you guys tonight. I really appreciate this. I'm sure by now you guys have all had the opportunity to look at my resume, and everyone is very stellar and accomplished. But one thing that I did want to give you is another aspect of me besides what you see on the resume. You sure don't know the fact that I'm a first-generation Nicaraguan, so I was born in Nicaragua, and my first language is Spanish, so English is definitely my second language. I have put myself through school. I'm very accomplished in the community. I've worked really hard with a lot of communities and worked wherever I can. I'm a Leadership St. Tammany alumni. My point of telling you all of this is you don't see a lot of that on the resume, and everything that I have, I've earned myself. So my point is that I'm willing to do all of the work that's necessary. I've always been a go-getter, and I've always really been a results type of, results-oriented type of person. So I really want to do what's best for St. Tammany, and I'm really looking for an opportunity to not just help you guys, but help St. Tammany. And my point of this is just to ask you, if you come to a crossroads where you have to decide between one and another, you know, you have someone here that besides all the accolades that are in that resume, you do have someone here with the intangibles such as integrity, intelligence, and passion, and that's something that I really want to, you know, make a difference. So, thank you so much, and if you have any questions, I'm open to answering them.
Thank you.
Scarlett Roa Hogan.
Mr. Chairman, I want to put one other name in nomination. That would be Mr. Ken Thompson.
Okay, he's on the sheet.
Yes,
so we knew-
but he was
we knew-
not nominated until just now.
Okay.
I had sent the email in with his resume a few days ago.
Mr. Bender, you got a question?
I just want to ask Ms. Roa Hogan, you sat here all night?
Yes, she did.
Yep. Good for you. Good for you.
All right. We can move on, move on to the next item. Well, maybe we should.
Excuse me, Mr. Gould, I'm sorry, a point of order. If Mr. Belisario wishes to nominate an additional person than what was done at a previous meeting, then procedurally, the floor should be reopened.
Yeah,
And
you're
that
correct about
nomination, or the nominations, excuse me, should be reopened, that person added, and then the council should suspend its rules and appoint
That's correct.
at that point.
And thank you for catching that. I thought about it, and then I went blank.
Ken Thompson, he's there.
Gene, you need to move to open the floor.
I'll make a motion to open to the floor for the nomination, Mr.
Second,
Thompson.
vote with your lights, open your floor.
Mr. Stefanczyk? Mr. Bender?
All right.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Vote to close it now, Gene, make your nomination.
Okay, make a nomination for Mr. Ken Thompson.
Okay, second by Mr. Canulette, vote with your lights. Oh, excuse me, vote, move to close the floor, sorry. Move, second by Mr. Canulette. Now vote with your lights to close the floor. And go ahead and mark your sheets.
Mr. Smith? Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
Okay, while they're tallying the votes, the next item is a resolution to appoint 5 members to the Parish Personnel Board. I remember there was some nominations, Patrick Berrigan, Frederick L. Fields, I should say the Reverend Frederick L. Fields, Major Donald Sharp, and Joseph Allen. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4. We need a 5th one. That's correct.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Gould?
Yes, sir?
The council had previously received an email from the office advising of a recommendation by the West Chamber of Commerce. That was Mr. Tom Sheldon, Vice President of Gulf Coast Bank. That was pursuant to a request for any nominations that the chamber may have from the council office, and that was the one that they provided. And of course, if the council wishes to provide additional nominations, that would be perfectly.
Okay, well, we need someone, let's open up the floor for nominations. Second by Ms. O'Brien. Vote with your lights. Open up the floor.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
All right, would someone nominate that person that we were speaking about? Okay, and second by Mr. Stefancic. Well, actually, you don't need a second. You got the nomination. Do we have any other names? Move to close. Second by Mr. Stefancic. Vote with your lights to close.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
All right, well, we only have 5 nominees. And it kind of changed, but changes things a little bit, because I think to appoint all 5 right now, because we just added another name, we're going to have to suspend the rules and adopt. Would that be correct, Mr. Stefancic?
It would not be from my standpoint. The
No?
legal counsel shaking his head, yes, but once we open the nominations, let them lay over a month, you can always add to those nominations, but you don't have to extend for a month after that.
Okay, I'm good with that.
And we laid it over for a month, so that's been the way that this,
Okay, well, I'm good with that. That cures the other election as well. Well, we will have to vote to appoint once we get the results. Okay.
We don't need the results on that. There's only 5 members to be adopted. You need to appoint.
I'm talking about the other one.
Okay.
Yes. That's correct. All right, resolution to reappoint John. Oh, sorry, thank you. Second by Ms. O'Brien. Vote with your lights on the appointments. Yeah.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
All right, resolution to reappoint John Sandage and James Kowalski to the St. Tammany Parish Sewer District Number 1. Thompson, Groby, vote with your lights on those appointments.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
All right, under discussions and other matters, one item, motion to refer to the zoning commission a recommendation of the proposed rezoning of 1.9 acres from A3 to I1, Ward 6, District 6. Mr. Tanner. Second by Mr. Thompson. And vote with your lights on the motion.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
All right, we're still tallying the votes. Need a motion to open up the items off the floor. Second by,
Mr. Chairman, we already moved to open the action items off the floor.
so we don't have to go back again?
3 of them need to be taken before you open it up for anything else.
That's correct. So vote with your lights on that.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, starting at the top of the list, number 1 was already heard. So we'll go to number 2, ordinance to amend the 2012 operating budget, amendment number 7. Mr. Bellisario.
So moved.
By Mr. Stefansic. Vote on that amendment, budget amendment.
He's right.
Why not?
Introduction.
Oh, it's the ordinance for introduction, I'm sorry. Motion to refer to the zoning commission for recommendation to propose rezoning of 3.1 acres located at 57 Helen Drive, Madisonville, from HC2 to A4. That's interesting. Ward 1, District 1. Mr. Dean. Okay. No? You got a motion, we got a second by Mr. Thompson? Vote with your lights on the motion.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
What's the count on?
I said it.
Okay, I didn't hear you. Resolution authorizing special counsel to represent the parish defending the lawsuit filed in the United States District Court for Eastern District of Louisiana entitled Jonah Baskell et al. Versus Jefferson Parish et al. Civil action number 12-1926H2. Okay. This, we have been served with a suit by someone basically suing because we don't have provisions in our code to provide for ADA access for cabs, taxi cabs. Yeah, for cabs. Cabs. Yes, we do, but we got sued, along with Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Bernard, and anybody else?
I think that was it.
Okay, so that's what that's about. So we need to appoint a specialist. Guys, come on, let's try to get this done. We need to appoint someone, an attorney, or authorize Terry to hire an attorney to handle this, because this is a very specialized field. So I have a motion and a second, is that correct? No, I don't. You, Stefansic and Canulette, okay. Vote with your lights to authorize the hiring of an attorney. Tommy and Zelmo, okay.
Mr. Stefansic, Mr. Bender, Mr. Artigue, Mr. Smith. Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Mr. Chair.
Wait, we got to get the results on the vote.
I have a question about the attorney. Are we going to consult with the other parishes to see if we all kind of agree on one
The
person?
guy we're hiring is actually representing Jefferson Parish. Okay. Are there any other items from off the floor that anyone would like to propose?
Yes.
Okay. Speak about it, and then we have to vote on whether or not we're going to open up the floor.
Come on, guys.
And
not-
by the way, guys, if you ever wanted to get him, it's a unanimous vote.
That's right.
It will be after you hear it.
Okay,
right.
no, seriously, you got a resolution for the state of Louisiana to repair Robert and Brown Switch Circle due to deteriorating road conditions. It's getting really bad because they break half of it up and part of it's starting to sink. They just need to fix it right. And they need to get on with it instead of doing a foot and a half at a time and then leaving for a month.
Yeah. What Chris is talking about, it's
Well, wait a
still
minute,
under.
wait a minute. Wait, before we get into the discussion, I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Open up items off the floor. Vote with your lights, please.
It's screwed up. Oh, yes, sir, there is problems.
No.
Aside, that's a minor inconvenience. The frickin' road is sinking. Did they do? Who was it? Buddy Gold? Ooh.
Announce it.
Motion fails. 12 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent.
I'll change my vote to yes. Go ahead.
Resolution for the state to repair the Robert Road and Brownswood Circle. Right, please.
All right, motion,
Okay.
and we have a second by
Me.
Belisario. All right, do we need any more discussion on this?
Yes.
All right, come on.
Okay. I'll let it slide.
Wait a minute, is Johnny here? Johnny?
Steve, I have talked to Johnny Bordelon on this job more than all the other people in the parish. The state, as Johnny will confirm for you, this work, they'll be reworking, if they continue the way they are, they'll be working on it in 2013. The road around, the concrete is failing, the road is sinking in 3 different areas. And now, as Johnny knows, I've addressed this, he and I have talked back and forth. It's been almost 3 months since I was notified of the failures where the road is sinking. The asphalt is sinking because of the subbase. We had to get a drainage ditch subsurface because they cut it so steep, a car drove off of it into a ditch and flipped over. And the signage for it, one of the biggest complaints, they need to revisit the signage because the complaints I'm getting from people from the entire district is the signs are so close and so complex, they get confused. People are stopping at yield signs. I mean, the whole
Okay, I
thing
mean,
is...
yeah, Gene, I'll go along with it. I drove through there just 3 days ago, and I didn't see that kind of problems, but if
Okay.
there is something, I'll go ahead and support it, but I
Do,
just,
do me one other
I didn't see
favor.
it. I'll drive down there again.
Okay, before you go home tonight, go down onto Brunswick Road and drive the roundabout. You'll really appreciate it since there are no streetlights.
Okay.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
All right, we have the results from the Cultural Affairs Commission. The following people have been elected: Simone Burke, Stephen Cephalou, Lisa Barnett, Scarlett Rohogan, and Jennifer Besh. We will need, congratulations, we will need someone to move to appoint.
So moved.
And second by Ms. O'Brien. Vote with your lights on the approval. Appointment.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
Any other business? Motion to adjourn?